At 9:30 a.m., my bank card was declined. My husband texted me immediately after. I locked your account. Do not come to the lake house this summer. My mother wants it for our family, and you do not fit the aesthetic. He had absolutely no idea that I built that Lake Lanier estate with my own blood, sweat, and money from the ground up before we even met. So I did the only logical thing a disrespected woman could do. I sold the entire property out from under them, right before their VIP weekend event. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to remind an entitled partner exactly who they are dealing with, and show them that playing with your peace comes with a very heavy price tag. Growing up in the working-class neighborhoods of Decatur, Georgia, I learned the value of $1 early on. My hands were accustomed to hard work, and I never waited for anyone to hand me a silver platter. By the time I was in my early 30s, I had transformed a modest savings account from my college days into Onyx Properties, a highly profitable eco-luxury real estate development firm. I specialized in acquiring dilapidated properties and turning them into sustainable, high-end homes for Atlanta's elite. It was grueling, demanding work that required late nights and dirt under my fingernails, but it was mine. Marcus, on the other hand, was a mid-level financial analyst at a downtown corporate bank. He wore expensive tailored suits, drove a leased sports car, and loved to project the image of a wealthy Wall Street tycoon. This arrogant attitude was carefully cultivated by his mother, Vivian. Vivian was a woman absolutely obsessed with status, constantly chasing the illusion that her family was part of Atlanta's historic old money elite. From the very day Marcus and I got married, Vivian made it perfectly clear that my Decatur roots were a permanent stain on her imaginary pristine pedigree. She would make backhanded comments about my natural hair, critique the way I spoke, and constantly remind everyone that I was just a girl who worked with construction crews. The morning my entire marriage shattered, I was standing inside an exclusive invite-only stone and tile showroom in Buckhead. I had spent 2 hours carefully selecting imported Italian marble slabs for a multi-million-dollar renovation project I was personally overseeing. The total invoice came to $32,000. The showroom manager, a sharply dressed woman who catered exclusively to Atlanta's top developers and designers, smiled politely as she swiped the premium joint credit card I used for basic household expenses and minor business transactions. The card machine chimed a sharp, unpleasant tone that echoed in the quiet, high-ceilinged room. The manager frowned, slightly swiped the card a second time, and looked up at me with an incredibly uncomfortable expression. "I am so sorry, Zuri, but the card is showing as declined." I stared at her, feeling a hot, prickling flush of embarrassment creep up my neck and spread across my cheeks. There were other wealthy clients browsing in the showroom, prominent architects and rival developers who knew me by reputation. I could feel their curious eyes burning into my back, wondering why the successful owner of Onyx Properties could not cover a simple materials invoice. "That is completely impossible," I said smoothly, forcing a confident, unwavering smile to mask my rising panic. "There must be a sudden fraud alert due to the high purchase amount. Let me just step aside and call my husband to clear it up with the bank." I grabbed my phone and stepped away from the main counter, my heels clicking sharply against the polished concrete floor as I moved toward a quiet, secluded corner of the showroom behind a display of granite slabs. I dialed Marcus rapidly. He answered on the second ring, his voice dripping with a thick, self-satisfied arrogance that immediately set my teeth on edge. "Card declined," I assume Marcus said, not even bothering to say hello. "What exactly is going on with the account, Marcus?" I asked, keeping my voice low and dangerously even, so no one else could hear. "I am standing in the middle of a luxury showroom, trying to close a massive materials order for my new property. You are embarrassing me in public." "You are embarrassing yourself, Zuri." He scoffed, the condescension radiating through the phone line like toxic waste. "I froze the account this morning. You are entirely out of control with these expenses. You are just a girl from Decatur flipping trash houses. Stop spending my hard-earned money acting like you are some real corporate entrepreneur." The sheer audacity of his words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. My hard-earned money. The joint account he had just frozen was funded almost entirely by the passive income generated from my rental properties. Marcus merely managed the transfers because his fragile ego needed to feel like he was the man of the house controlling the finances. Before I could correct his massive delusion and remind him exactly who funded his expensive lifestyle, he dropped the real bomb. And while we are on the subject of boundaries, do not even plan on going up to the Lake Lanier house this summer. Marcus continued, completely talking over my attempt to speak. I am explicitly forbidding you from stepping foot on that property. I gripped my phone tighter, my knuckles turning white against the sleek case. Excuse me, I hissed. That is my house. My mother needs the lake house for a major family event next month. Marcus declared, completely ignoring my protest, as if my ownership of the property was just a minor technicality. She is hosting some very important guests, including my sister Chloe and her husband Trent. Trent is bringing his wealthy white relatives down from Boston. Mom made it very clear that your working-class vibe and cheap aesthetic will completely ruin the upscale atmosphere she is trying to curate. You simply do not have the upper-class presence required to mingle with Trent's family. You would just embarrass us. Do not go to the Lake Zuri. That is a direct order. He hung up the phone, leaving me standing in the corner of the marble showroom, listening to the dead dial tone. A normal wife might have broken down in tears right there in public. A normal woman might have screamed, caused a massive scene, or desperately called her husband back to beg and plead for him to unlock her financial lifeline. But I was not a normal woman, and I was certainly not a helpless victim trapped in a financial corner. I took a deep, steadying breath, closing my eyes for just a second. I let the shock and the hurt wash over me, and then I let it evaporate, allowing the anger to crystallize into pure ice-cold focus. I turned around and walked right back to the showroom manager, my posture perfect, my chin held high. I apologize for the brief delay, I said, my voice steady, warm, and exceptionally pleasant. My husband was simply dealing with a minor banking error on his end at the corporate office. I reached into my designer handbag and bypassed the wallet compartment that held the useless joint card entirely. Instead, I unzipped a hidden interior pocket and pulled out a sleek, heavy black metal card tied directly to Onyx Properties LLC. This was my private corporate account, an account holding millions of dollars in liquid assets. An account Marcus had absolutely no idea existed because I knew better than to mix my true empire with a man who needed to feel superior. Please put the $32,000 on this one, I instructed, sliding the heavy metal card across the counter. The transaction went through instantly, the machine printing out the receipt with a satisfying zip. As I signed my name with a flourish, a genuine, terrifying smile touched my lips. Marcus actually thought he had just cut off my survival line. He truly believed he had put the poor, uncultured girl from Decatur back in her rightful place. He completely forgot that the joint account he just proudly locked was nothing more than the allowance fund I let him play with to stroke his pathetic pride. And much more importantly, as he planned his mother's grand bougie vacation to impress his racist, elitist brother-in-law, Marcus forgot exactly whose name was legally written on the deed to that Lake Lanier estate. The heavy oak door of our Buckhead townhouse closed behind me with a solid thud. The rich scent of garlic, smoked paprika, and seared shrimp filled the air from the meal I had prepped earlier that morning. I dropped my keys into the brass bowl by the entrance, fully prepared to tear Marcus apart verbally for the humiliating stunt he pulled at the showroom. I wanted to look him dead in the eye and demand exactly why he thought freezing a joint allowance card would stop a massive business transaction. But the moment I stepped into the living room, the air shifted. I realized immediately that Marcus had called for reinforcements. Sitting on my custom Italian leather sofa, casually swirling a glass of my expensive Pinot Noir, was his mother. Vivian wore her signature silk scarf, a string of pearls she never took off, and a judgment-loaded expression that she reserved specifically for me. Marcus stood behind her, his arms crossed over his chest. He looked like a little boy hiding behind his mother's skirt, while desperately trying to project the authority of a king. Garlic and Old Bay seasoning, Vivian said, not even offering a greeting. She fanned her hand in front of her nose, her face twisting in absolute disgust. You can take the girl out of the Decatur housing projects, but you truly cannot scrub the Decatur out of the girl. I told Marcus we should have met at the country club. This house always smells like a neighborhood street cookout. I walked straight to the kitchen island, placing my designer handbag down with a loud smack that made Marcus flinch. This house smells like a home paid for by the woman you are currently insulting, Vivian, I said, keeping my voice dangerously steady. And Marcus, since you are standing right there acting tough, maybe you want to explain why you thought freezing my card would do anything other than make you look foolish. Marcus stepped forward, puffing out his chest. Do not speak to my mother with that tone, Zuri. I froze the account because your spending is reckless. You buy luxury building materials, like you are shopping for groceries. I am the head of this household, and it is my job to rein in your financial delusions. You need to understand that your little house-flipping hobby is draining our resources. I let out a harsh, dry laugh. Our resources. Marcus, the account you froze is funded entirely by the rental income from my commercial properties. I let you put your name on it so you could feel like a provider. You did not cut off my funds today. You just cut off your own golf membership fees. Vivian stood up sharply, waving her manicured hand to dismiss my words. Marcus is protecting the family assets, Zuri. Something you know absolutely nothing about since your people do not have generational wealth to protect. We have a major family crisis on our hands, and your little renovation hobby is simply not the priority right now. I crossed my arms and leaned against the marble counter. Enlighten me, Vivian. What is this massive family crisis? Vivian took a slow sip of her wine, lifting her chin to look down her nose at me. Chloe and Trent are hosting a highly exclusive event next month. Trent's family is flying down from Boston. They are Boston elite, Zuri. Real money, old money. They own shipping logistics companies and sit on hospital boards. Chloe and Trent are hosting a luxury vow renewal and corporate retreat to celebrate their anniversary. They need the Lake Lanier estate to show Trent's family that Chloe comes from a background of equal prestige and wealth. The audacity of her statement hung heavy in the room. Chloe was Marcus's younger sister, a spoiled woman who had never worked a day in her life. And Trent was her arrogant white husband, who worked in cryptocurrency investments. Trent constantly spoke down to everyone in our community, carrying a massive white savior complex, while simultaneously exploiting black culture whenever it suited his business needs. Marcus basically worshipped the ground Trent walked on, desperate for proximity to whiteness and wealth. I cannot have you walking around my lake house, Vivian continued, placing her wine glass on the glass table. You do not possess the refinement required to host white people of that caliber. You lack basic class. You are loud. Your hair is always in those thick twists instead of being properly pressed. You use slang that embarrasses Marcus in front of his banking colleagues. If Trent's family sees you claiming to be the lady of the estate, they will think Marcus married the help. I will not let your working-class aesthetic humiliate my daughter and ruin her standing with her wealthy in-laws. I stared at this woman. A black woman who had spent her entire adult life trying to erase her own roots to appease a society that would never truly accept her. She was so desperate to impress an arrogant white man and his Boston family that she was willing to banish her own daughter-in-law from a family event. But the absolute joke of the century was entirely on her. She just called it her lake house. She just called it family property. Vivian, I said, my voice dropping to a deadly calm pitch. That lake house does not belong to the family, it belongs to me. I bought the land, I hired the contractors, I picked out the timber and the stone. You and Chloe cannot host a vow renewal at a property you do not own. Marcus snapped, slamming his hand hard onto the kitchen counter. Stop lying to make yours feel important. We are married. Georgia is an equitable division state. What is yours is mine. And as your husband, I am taking full control of that property for the month of June. Trent is bringing highly important investors down with his family. He needs a pristine, high-class environment to close his deals, and you are officially banned from the premises until they leave. You will stay here in Atlanta and stay out of sight, so you do not ruin this opportunity for Trent and Chloe. Vivian reached into her designer tote bag with a smug, triumphant smile. She pulled out a crisp, folded piece of paper and tossed it onto the kitchen island. It slid across the smooth marble surface and stopped right in front of my hands. We knew you would be difficult about this. Vivian sneered, her eyes gleaming with malice. People from your background always get defensive and aggressive when they are told to step aside for their betters. So Marcus took the necessary legal precautions to ensure you do not show up and ruin Chloe's special weekend. I looked down at the document. The bold black letters across the top read, "Official Trespass Warning." My eyes rapidly scanned the paragraphs. It explicitly stated that I was legally barred from entering the premises of the Lake Lanier estate between June 10th and June 25th. The document boldly claimed that if I violated this order, local law enforcement would be called to arrest me and remove me from the property immediately. I did not scream. I did not cry. I did not throw the bottle of wine across the room. I simply picked up the document and looked at the bottom of the page. There was a signature. Marcus had proudly signed his name on the line designated for the sole property owner. My mind began to race, calculating the sheer, unadulterated stupidity of what I was looking at. How could Marcus legally sign a formal trespass warning to ban me from my own property? He was a financial analyst, not a legal expert, but even a novice should know that a spouse cannot unilaterally ban the other from marital assets without a formal court order. Unless he had somehow convinced himself that he possessed sole legal authority over the estate. Before I could even fully process the sheer absurdity of Marcus proudly signing his name on a document he had absolutely no legal authority to enforce, a slow, arrogant clapping sound echoed from the hallway. Heavy footsteps approached the kitchen, and a moment later, Trent strolled into my line of sight. He was wearing his usual uniform of a tailored button-down shirt, an overpriced fleece vest, and the unearned confidence of a man who had never been told no in his entire life. He walked right past me, completely ignoring my presence, and casually opened my custom-built glass wine cabinet. He reached for a bottle of reserve Cabernet that I had imported from Napa Valley for a private celebration, grabbed a crystal glass, and poured himself a generous serving without bothering to ask. "You really need to lower your voice," Zuri Trent said, taking a slow sip of my wine and swirling it around the glass. "The aggressive tone is completely unnecessary. Marcus is just trying to protect the family assets, and you are making this entirely too difficult." I stared at him, my jaw tightening as I took in the audacity of this man standing in the center of a house I paid for, drinking my private reserve and trying to police my tone. Trent was exactly the kind of man my mother-in-law worshipped. I was a white cryptocurrency investor from a wealthy Boston family who used buzzwords like blockchain and decentralized finance to mask the fact that he was essentially a professional grifter. He contributed absolutely nothing tangible to society, yet he walked around Atlanta acting as if he owned the entire city, simply because his last name opened doors at the country club. "Do not come into my kitchen and tell me how to speak, Trent," I said, keeping my posture perfectly straight. "And put my wine down. You are a guest in my home, though you have heavily overstayed your welcome." Trent chuckled, a condescending sound that made Marcus stand up a little straighter, as if drawing strength from his brother-in-law's arrogance. "Actually, Zuri, I am not a guest. I am acting as the official property manager for the Lake Lanier estate for the month of June. Marcus came to me for advice because your spending habits have become a serious liability. As the head of this household, he realized he needed to take operational control of the real estate portfolio before you drove his credit into the ground." Marcus nodded eagerly, stepping closer to Trent. "I authorized Trent to take over the logistics for the vow renewal and the corporate retreat. He knows how to handle high-net-worth individuals. He knows the standard of luxury his family expects. I signed the management rights over to him this morning." Vivian smiled proudly, looking at Trent, as if he had just cured a major disease. "Trent is doing us a massive favor, Zuri. His investors are flying down on private jets. These are men who sit on corporate boards and control shipping empires. We cannot have you showing up to the lake house trying to network or handing out your cheap business cards. Trent is graciously elevating our family profile, and you should be thanking him for bringing this level of prestige to our doorstep." I looked between the three of them, observing the toxic, twisted dynamic playing out right in front of me. Marcus, a black man so deeply insecure about his own lack of achievement, was perfectly willing to hand over his wife's hard-earned assets to a white man just to secure a pat on the back. Vivian was actively cheering on the theft of my property because proximity to Trent's whiteness made her feel like she had finally arrived in high society. and Trent was thriving on the power trip, playing the ultimate white savior for a family he secretly viewed as beneath him. You cannot authorize management rights to a property you do not own. Marcus, I stated clearly, enunciating every single word, so even his deluded brain could comprehend it. My company owns the Lake Lanier estate. You have zero legal standing. Georgia law does not automatically grant you ownership of an LLC established entirely with my separate funds. Trent sighed loudly, setting the wine glass down with an exaggerated roll of his eyes. He leaned against my marble counter, looking at me with the pitying expression of a teacher dealing with a slow student. Zuri, please do not try to lecture me on corporate law. You flip houses for a living. You are essentially a general contractor with a decent eye for paint colors. Georgia is an equitable division state. You purchased the lake house during the marriage, which makes it a marital asset. Marcus has every right to claim his half and exercise authority over it. Furthermore, because he is officially listed on your joint banking accounts, the law views him as an equal financial partner in your ventures. He reached into the inner pocket of his fleece vest and pulled out a folded document, tapping it against the counter. Marcus signed a formal management agreement with my company today. It gives me full operational control of the lake house. We have already scheduled the caterers, the security teams, and the luxury boat rentals. My family and my investors are expecting a flawless, high-class experience. If you even try to show up and cause a scene, I will personally have the county sheriff remove you for trespassing and harassment. Do not test me, Zuri. You do not have the resources or the connections to fight my legal team. I looked at Trent, analyzing the smug certainty in his eyes. He truly believed he had me completely cornered. He thought his Boston money and his basic understanding of equitable division laws made him invincible. He assumed that because I came from a working-class neighborhood in Decatur, I was uneducated, financially illiterate, and easily intimidated by legal threats. He thought I was just a woman with a tool belt who got lucky in the real estate market. I had no idea that I spent years studying property law, corporate asset protection, and trust management specifically to ensure that men exactly like him could never steal what I built. You really think you have it all figured out, do you, Trent? I asked, my voice dangerously soft. You think you can waltz into Atlanta, slap your name on my property, and host your fake cryptocurrency investors on my dime? I am not thinking, Zuri, I am doing, Trent replied with a victorious smirk. Now, if you will excuse us, Marcus, and I have a dinner reservation at Bones to finalize the investor guest list. Vivian, are you ready? Vivian grabbed her designer bag, giving me one last look of sheer contempt. You brought this on yourself, Zuri. If you had just learned how to behave like a proper, refined wife, Marcus would not have had to take such extreme measures. Do yourself a favor. Stay in Atlanta, keep your head down, and let the real professionals handle the business. Marcus did not even look at me as he followed his mother and Trent toward the front door. He walked with a sickening swagger, genuinely believing he had just won the ultimate victory. He thought he had successfully put me in my place and secured his position as the powerful man of the house. The front door clicked shut, and the heavy silence of the empty townhouse settled around me. I did not shed a single tear. I did not scream or throw anything. I stood perfectly still in the center of my kitchen, feeling a massive surge of adrenaline rush through my veins. The sheer stupidity of their plan was almost breathtaking. Trent thought he was a genius for exploiting marital property laws, and Marcus thought he was brilliant for signing a stack of legal documents he clearly had not bothered to read or understand. I pulled my phone out of my pocket and immediately dialed a number I knew by heart. It rang twice before a deep, commanding voice answered. Desmond, my attorney, the voice said. Desmond, it is Zuri, I said, walking toward my home office and locking the door behind me. I need you to drop whatever you are doing and pull up the county property records for the Lake Lanier estate. I also need you to check the recent filings under my LLC. Zuri, it is almost 8 o'clock at night. What exactly am I looking for? Desmond asked, though I could hear the sound of his keyboard clicking in the background. Desmond and I had met during our undergraduate years at an HBCU in Atlanta. He was a shark of a lawyer who specialized in corporate litigation and asset protection. He was the one who had structured all of my companies to ensure my personal wealth remained absolutely bulletproof. Marcus just came into my house with his brother-in-law Trent. I explained, pacing across the hardwood floor. They proudly announced that Marcus signed a management agreement handing operational control of the lake house over to Trent for a massive corporate event next month. Marcus also served me with a signed trespass warning. Trent tried to throw equitable division laws in my face, claiming Marcus has equal authority over the property. Desmond let out a sharp, genuine laugh over the phone line. Trent is an idiot. Equitable division applies during a divorce proceeding, not during an active marriage, when the asset is held by an independent LLC. Marcus has zero authority to sign a management agreement or a trespass warning for a commercial property he does not legally own. I know that, I replied, staring out the window at the dark street. But Marcus was incredibly confident. He kept bragging about how he took the necessary legal precautions. He said he filed paperwork to take full control of the property. Marcus is lazy, Desmond. He does not hire lawyers. He downloads cheap legal forms from the internet and signs them without reading the fine print. I need you to check the county portal right now. Tell me what garbage he actually filed today. The line was quiet for a long moment, filled only by the rapid sound of Desmond typing and clicking his mouse. I waited, feeling my heart pound with a fierce, calculating energy. I knew Marcus. I knew his arrogance was matched only by his profound incompetence. Oh my goodness, Desmond suddenly said, his voice dropping into a tone of absolute shock and amusement. Zuri, you are not going to believe what this fool just submitted to the county clerk's office. What did he do, Desmond? I did not file a management agreement with the county, Desmond said, holding back a laugh. He attempted to file a property deed transfer. He tried to attach his name to the Lake Lanier estate to prove to Trent that he had equal ownership. But because he did not want to pay a lawyer to draft the paperwork, he used a standard generic quitclaim deed template he found online. And I pressed, feeling a massive smile spread across my face. And because he has absolutely no idea how corporate real estate law works, he filled out the grantor and grantee sections completely backward. Desmond explained, his voice practically vibrating with excitement. Zuri, he did not add his name to the property. He officially and legally filed a quitclaim deed explicitly renouncing, waiving, and surrendering any and all future claims, marital or otherwise, to the Lake Lanier estate and to Onyx Properties, LLC. He literally just handed you the entire company and the lake house free and clear of any future equitable division claims. I leaned back against my office desk, letting out a loud, breathless laugh that echoed in the quiet room. Marcus and Trent thought they had just staged a masterful corporate takeover. They thought they had legally cornered me and secured the perfect luxury venue to impress their wealthy Boston investors. They had completely dug their own financial graves with a stupid, improperly filed legal document. Desmond, I said, my voice sharp and decisive, print that quitclaim deed and secure it immediately. Do not say a word to Marcus or his family. Let them continue planning their little corporate retreat. Let them bring all their expensive furniture and their VIP guests down to the lake. What are you going to do? Zuri, Desmond asked, the anticipation clear in his tone. I walked over to my desk and opened my laptop, pulling up the contact information for the CEO of the largest luxury resort conglomerate in the Southeast. They wanted to play corporate monopoly with my assets, I said, staring at the screen. So I am going to show them how real business is done. Draw up the sale papers, Desmond. I am selling the lake house. I ended the call with Desmond, the finality of my decision ringing in the quiet space of my home office. Selling the Lake Lanier estate was no longer just a swift business transaction. It was an execution. But before I could finalize the terms with the resort conglomerate, I needed to know exactly what I was burning down. I needed to see the full architecture of their lies. I walked out of my office and down the hallway to the master bedroom. The space smelled faintly of Marcus's expensive cologne, a scent that used to mean comfort, but now just signaled fraud. On his mahogany nightstand sat his iPad Pro. Marcus never took it with him to dinner. He also never used two-factor authentication. He firmly believed he was the smartest person in any room, operating under the delusion that no one would ever dare question his authority or snoop through his devices. His passcode was simply his own birth year. It was pathetic, really. I tapped the 4 digits and the screen unlocked instantly. The Messages app was already open. Right at the top of his recent conversations was a group chat titled Lanier Legacy Wealth. The members were listed clearly at the top of the screen: Marcus, Vivian, Chloe, and Trent. I sat on the edge of the plush mattress, the cool glow of the screen illuminating my face in the darkened room, and began to scroll up. What I found was not just a betrayal of our marriage. It was a masterclass in financial parasitism. There was no vow renewal. There was no sweet, intimate anniversary celebration for Chloe and Trent. I tapped on a high-resolution PDF document that Trent had shared to the group earlier that week. The digital brochure was sleek, professional, and dripping with corporate buzzwords. It read, "Exclusive Cryptocurrency and Tech Leadership Summit hosted at the Bradley Family Private Estate. Tickets were priced at $10,000 per night." Trent was actively marketing my property to his wealthy, white investors in Boston as a private retreat owned by his family. He had taken photos of my custom-built infinity pool, my imported marble fire pits, and the private dock I had spent months negotiating county permits for, and he had slapped his own arrogant name across them. The sheer racial and classist audacity of it made my blood run ice cold. This mediocre white man who contributed absolutely nothing tangible to society was using the sweat equity of a black woman from Decatur to cosplay as a real estate mogul for his rich friends. And my own husband was cheering him on. But why? Marcus was egotistical, but he usually guarded his pride fiercely. Why would he let Trent publicly claim a house that Marcus himself desperately wanted to show off to his banking colleagues? I scrolled back further, digging into conversations from 3 weeks ago. The truth was uglier than I could have ever imagined. I found a frantic message from Marcus directed at Trent. "Please tell me the ticket sales are moving. American Express just flagged my account again, and the crypto losses from last quarter are catching up to me. If I do not come up with $80,000 by the end of July, they are going to sue me and garnish my wages at the bank. If Zuri finds out, she will divorce me and take everything." Trent responded with a laughing emoji. "Relax, Marcus. The Boston guys love the idea of a Southern Lake retreat. We have 15 VIPs confirmed. At 10 grand a head, my company pulls in 150,000. I will wire you your 20% cut as soon as the weekend wraps. That is 30 grand to keep your creditors quiet. Just make sure the house is empty. I cannot have your wife showing up and asking questions. My investors think my grandfather built that place." My mother-in-law, Vivian, chimed in right below Trent's message. Her words were like venom dripping onto the screen. "Marcus, you have to keep Zuri away from the lake. Trent is saving your life right now. If your colleagues at the bank find out you are drowning in secret debt, your career is over. Do whatever you have to do to lock her out. Freeze her cards, change the locks. I do not care. If her ghetto relatives or loud friends show up, Trent's investors will run for the hills. We cannot let a girl from the projects ruin this family's financial rescue." Chloe added her own 2 cents. "Honestly, we need to get up there a week early and throw out all of Zuri's cheap decor. We need to stage it with real luxury pieces, so Trent's family feels comfortable. I am not having them sit on sofas bought by a woman who still wears her hair in braids to corporate functions. She has zero class." I sat there in the dark, reading the words of the people I had shared holidays with, the people I had cooked for, the people I had actively tried to build a family with. They were a hive of parasites. Marcus was secretly drowning in $80,000 of day trading and cryptocurrency debt, hiding it behind his tailored suits and arrogant demands. Trent was using my property to run a fraudulent luxury summit, promising Marcus a miserable 20% cut just to keep him desperate and compliant. And Vivian and Chloe were actively weaponizing their internalized racism and classism against me, eager to erase my existence so a white man could save their golden boy from public humiliation. I took meticulous screenshots of every single message, forwarding them directly to my secure private server. I captured Trent's fraudulent brochure. I captured Marcus's admission of hidden marital debt. I captured Vivian's disgusting discriminatory remarks. This was no longer just about selling a house. This was about gathering the ammunition required to absolutely obliterate Marcus in divorce court and bury Trent in civil litigation. They wanted to play games with my livelihood to fund their fake wealthy lifestyles. I was going to let them build their house of cards as high as possible before I kicked the table out from under them. As I reached the very bottom of the chat, checking the messages sent just an hour ago while Marcus and Trent were driving to their fancy steakhouse dinner, I saw one last exchange. Trent had sent a message expressing a sudden, fleeting moment of panic. Marcus, are you absolutely sure Zuri cannot legally halt the event? If she calls the cops and proves she owns the LLC, my investors will demand full refunds and I will be looking at wire fraud charges. I need absolute certainty that she has no legal ground to stand on. Marcus replied immediately. The text bubble sat there on the screen, a monument to his supreme fatal arrogance. Do not worry, I tricked her into signing a quitclaim deed during tax season last year. The house is now under my control. I stared at the glowing screen of the tablet, letting the sheer magnitude of his delusion wash over me. Marcus actually believed he had outsmarted a woman who built a commercial real estate portfolio from scratch. He thought his cheap tricks and backroom conversations with Trent had successfully stripped me of my own assets. I did not waste another second sitting in the dark. I securely emailed every single screenshot to my encrypted corporate drive, wiped the search history on his device, and placed the tablet exactly where I found it on his nightstand. I grabbed my car keys and walked out the front door into the humid Atlanta night air. My drive to Desmond's office was a blur of focused, cold calculation. The streetlights reflected off the sleek hood of my car as I navigated the traffic toward Midtown. Desmond was working late as he always did when we were preparing for a major acquisition. But tonight, we were not reviewing contractor bids. We were reviewing the financial suicide of my soon-to-be ex-husband. I walked into Desmond's office suite. The space was a testament to black excellence, with his law degrees displayed proudly on the wall and the heavy mahogany desk covered in neatly organized files. Desmond was leaning back in his leather chair, staring at his dual monitors with an expression of absolute disbelief. He had a printed document resting on his desk, his hand hovering over it like he was afraid touching it might make the stupidity contagious. "You got here fast," Desmond said, shaking his head slowly as I closed his heavy glass door behind me. "I pulled the county records just like you asked. Zuri, I have handled corporate litigation for a decade. I have seen men do incredibly foolish things to hide assets during divorces. But I have never in my entire career seen a man actively legally disinherit himself while trying to pull off a heist." I dropped my bag on one of his leather guest chairs and crossed my arms. "Show me," I said, my voice steady. "Tell me exactly what my husband filed behind my back." Desmond picked up the freshly printed document and slid it across the desk toward me. It was a standard generic quitclaim deed, the kind you can download for $30 off any discount legal website. It was stamped and officially recorded by the county clerk right in the middle of last year's tax season. I looked at the date and a memory instantly flashed through my mind. It was late April last year. I was rushing out the door to handle a crisis at a development site. Marcus had handed me a thick stack of paperwork, casually mentioning that his accountant needed my signature on a few standard marital tax optimization forms. I was holding my coffee in one hand and my phone in the other. Because I trusted the man I married, because I believed we were building a life together, I signed exactly where he pointed without reading the fine print. He had slipped this deed right into the middle of that stack. "Marcus thought he was pulling off the ultimate corporate takeover," Desmond explained, leaning forward and tapping the paper with his expensive pen. "He wanted to transfer the Lake Lanier estate from your LLC into his own name, or at least into a joint marital trust, so he could claim equal legal ownership. He wanted to prove to his mother and to Trent that he was the powerful man controlling the wealth. But because Marcus is an arrogant, cheap fool who refused to hire a real attorney, he filled out the generic template completely backward." I looked closer at the bold black text on the recorded deed, my eyes scanning the designated fields. The legal terminology was basic, yet Marcus had fundamentally failed to understand it. "In a property transfer," Desmond continued, a sharp, mocking smile playing on his lips, "you have the grantor the person giving up the rights, and the grantee the person receiving the rights." Marcus put his own name on the grantor line. He listed Onyx Properties LLC, your solely owned company, on the grantee line. My breath caught in my throat as the reality of the document sank in. "Zuri," Desmond said, his voice ringing with absolute triumph, "Marcus did not steal your house. By signing this document and filing it with the county, he explicitly and permanently surrendered any equitable claim he might have ever had to the Lake Lanier estate. He legally declared that he waives all marital rights to the property and gifts his entire equitable interest back to your company. He handed you the house free and clear of any future divorce disputes. I stood there in the quiet office staring at the physical proof of his profound incompetence. Marcus had spent weeks plotting with his mother. He had spent hours strategizing with Trent, listening to that arrogant white man feed his ego. He had frozen my bank account and proudly handed me a trespass warning, entirely convinced he held all the power. He had done all of this based on a piece of paper that actually stripped him of every single right he thought he possessed. I dug his own grave, I whispered, a deep, resonant laugh finally escaping my chest. He handed the shovel to Trent and they both jumped right in. Exactly. Desmond laughed with me, leaning back in his chair. Trent thinks he can hide behind Georgia marital property laws. He thinks he can run his fraudulent $10,000 a night cryptocurrency summit on your land because he believes Marcus is an equal owner. Trent probably looked at the first page of the filing and assumed Marcus secured the bag. Neither of them actually read the binding clauses. They are selling VIP tickets to a property they have absolutely zero legal right to access. This is about more than just a house, Desmond. I walked over to the floor-to-ceiling window looking out at the Atlanta skyline. This is about respect. Marcus let Vivian and Chloe spit on my name. He let them call me a working-class embarrassment. He let Trent treat me like a tenant on my own land. They wanted to erase me so they could play pretend billionaires for a weekend. They wanted to steal the fruit of my labor to pay off Marcus's secret debts. I turned back to face my lawyer, all traces of humor vanishing from my expression. They want to play capitalism. They want to act like ruthless corporate sharks. Desmond, please lock this document in your most secure safe. Keep this completely quiet. Do not send a single cease and desist letter to Trent. Do not warn Marcus. Let them print their luxury brochures. Let them hire the caterers. Let them bring all their expensive rental furniture into the house. Desmond's eyes widened with anticipation, recognizing the sharp, calculated shift in my tone. What is the play, Zuri? They want to play capitalism, I said, my voice dropping to a cool, lethal register. I am going to sell this house right now. I left Desmond's office with my heart pounding a steady, rhythmic drumbeat of pure adrenaline against my ribs. The drive back to my Buckhead townhouse was a masterclass in emotional preparation. I knew exactly who Marcus was. He was a man driven entirely by his ego, a man who fed on the submission of others to make himself feel 10 feet tall. If I marched into that house radiating the power and knowledge I currently possessed, his fragile pride would instantly sense a threat. He would get suspicious, and a suspicious man might accidentally stumble into the truth before the trap was fully set. I needed him completely blind drunk on his own perceived victory. I parked my car in the driveway and sat in the dark for a full minute. I thought about the sheer disrespect Vivian had spewed in my own kitchen. I thought about Trent drinking my private reserve wine and treating me like a squatter on my own land. I let the sting of their audacity well up in my eyes, forcing genuine tears of frustration to blur my vision. I rubbed my eyes roughly until they were red and bloodshot, practicing a shaky, defeated breath. When I finally unlocked the front door and stepped into the foyer, I looked like a woman who had just had her entire world ripped out from under her. Marcus was sitting in the living room packing his expensive golf clubs into a travel bag. He did not even look up when I walked in. Marcus, please, I said, letting my voice crack perfectly on his name. I let a single tear spill over my eyelashes and roll down my cheek. Please do not do this. You cannot actually ban me from the lake house. I built that property with my own hands. It is my sanctuary. Marcus stopped polishing his 9-iron and finally looked at me. The smug, triumphant satisfaction radiating from his face was absolutely nauseating. He looked at my tear-stained cheeks and his chest puffed out with unearned authority. He truly believed he had broken the stubborn, independent woman from Decatur. I warned you, Zuri, Marcus said, his voice dripping with condescending pity. I told you that your reckless independence and your refusal to listen to my mother would have consequences. You thought you could just run your little real estate hobby and ignore the needs of this family. Now you are learning what happens when the head of the household has to step in and take control. I wrapped my arms around my stomach, physically shrinking myself to look smaller, more vulnerable. But Trent is going to ruin it, I sobbed, forcing my shoulders to shake. It is my home, Marcus. You cannot let him take it over. It is not just your home anymore, Zuri. It is a marital asset, and I have authorized Trent to use it for the betterment of our family's financial future, Marcus stated coldly, zipping up his golf bag. And since you are finally understanding your position in this marriage, I have an assignment for you. Trent and Chloe are driving up to the estate this weekend to begin staging the property for the Boston investors. Trent's people expect a very specific high-end aesthetic. Old money luxury. He walked over to me, looking down his nose with absolute disgust. Your ethnic art, those brightly colored paintings you bought from those street vendors in the West End, and your cheap homemade decorations do not fit the vibe of a corporate retreat, Marcus sneered. I need you to drive up to Lake Lanier tomorrow morning before they get there. Take a garbage bag and pack up your entire master bathroom. Get your heavy hair creams, your cheap oils, and your discount store candles out of there. Clear out your personal closet. I want all traces of your working-class aesthetic removed from the premises, so Trent does not have to be embarrassed when his clients walk through the doors. You will clear your junk out, and then you will hand the spare keys over to my mother. The sheer concentrated disrespect in his demands would have normally sent me into a blind rage. He was ordering me to strip my own multi-million-dollar property of my culture and my personal belongings, so a racist cryptocurrency bro could pretend he owned it. But beneath the mask of my crying face, my mind was doing a victory dance. Marcus had just handed me the perfect, unquestionable alibi to go up to the estate and remove all of my highly valuable personal property, my expensive artwork, my private documents, and my custom electronics before I handed the keys over to a new corporate owner. He was literally ordering me to secure my valuables. Okay, I whispered, staring at the floor and letting out a pathetic sniffle. I will go tomorrow morning. I will get my things out of Trent's way. See that you do, Marcus said, turning his back on me and grabbing his keys. I am going to the country club to meet Trent for cigars to celebrate the new management deal. Pack a bag for yourself tonight. I want you staying at your sister's cramped apartment in the city until the event is over. I do not want to look at your miserable face and have you ruin my mood. He walked out the front door, slamming it shut behind him. The sharp echo of this closing door faded into the silent townhouse. I stood in the foyer for exactly 10 seconds, listening to the engine of his sports car rev and speed off down the street. The moment the sound of his exhaust faded, my tears stopped instantly. My posture snapped bone straight. I wiped the remaining moisture from my cheeks with the back of my hand, my face settling into a mask of pure, absolute stone. I walked upstairs, pulled a designer duffel bag from the top of my closet, and packed a few days' worth of professional business attire. Marcus wanted me out of the house. That was perfectly fine. I did not want to share oxygen with a man who was actively conspiring to steal my wealth to fund his own pathetic financial failures. I grabbed my bag, locked the townhouse, and got into my Porsche. When the heavy doors of my car closed, sealing me in the quiet leather-scented interior, I did not drive toward my sister's apartment. I merged onto the highway and drove straight toward the towering glass and steel skyline of the Buckhead Financial District. My destination was the corporate headquarters of Horizon Hospitality Group, a massive resort and commercial real estate conglomerate that owned dozens of luxury eco-retreats across the country. For the past 2 years, their acquisition team had been aggressively courting me. They had sent numerous letters, emails, and corporate agents to my office, desperate to buy the Lake Lanier estate to expand their portfolio in the Southeast. I had always rejected their offers because the house was my personal masterpiece. Today, they were getting the prize. I walked into the soaring marble lobby of the Horizon building. The receptionist recognized me immediately, her eyes widening in surprise as I bypassed the standard visitor sign and desk. I took the private elevator directly to the executive floor and walked straight into the suite of the CEO of Horizon Hospitality. The CEO was a sharp, pragmatic businessman who respected power and hated wasting time. He looked up from his massive desk as I entered, unannounced, his gray eyebrows raising in surprise. Zuri, the CEO said, setting his pen down and gesturing to the leather chairs opposite his desk. To what do I owe the pleasure of this highly unexpected visit? Are you finally tired of receiving my weekly acquisition letters? I sat down, crossing my legs and maintaining absolute eye contact. You want the Lake Lanier estate. Today is your lucky day. I am ready to sell. The CEO sat up incredibly straight, his business instincts instantly firing up. He knew the value of my property. He knew the custom sustainable architecture, the private deep-water dock, and the pristine acreage were worth a fortune. I have a standing offer of $4.8 million on the table, the CEO said smoothly, folding his hands together. We can draft the paperwork by the end of the week. I shook my head, my expression unyielding. The property has been fully upgraded since your last appraisal. New infinity pool, imported marble, and state-of-the-art smart home security. The price is $5.2 million. And I require an all-cash offer. The CEO did not flinch. For a conglomerate of Horizon's size, $5 million in liquid capital was a standard Tuesday acquisition. He calculated the return on investment in his head for a few seconds before nodding. $5.2 million is acceptable given the market appreciation. I will have my legal team wire the funds into escrow by Friday morning. We can execute a standard 30-day close. No, I interrupted, leaning forward and placing my hands flat on his polished desk. I will fast-track the inspections and waive the standard contingencies. You can have the deed cleared and recorded by the end of the week. But I have one non-negotiable absolute condition for this sale. If you do not agree to this exact stipulation, I walk out that door and sell it to your top competitor. The CEO narrowed his eyes, intrigued by my intensity. Name your conditions, Zuri. The sale could be fully funded and the deed recorded on June 20th, I told him, but the physical handover of the property and the moment Horizon's corporate security team officially enforced possession had to happen at exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon. Not a minute before, not a minute after. I wanted the estate legally ready for transfer before the showdown, but I wanted Horizon's people arriving at the gates at 2 p.m. sharp to claim their new corporate asset in front of everyone. The CEO looked at me, a highly perceptive businessman, recognizing that there was a massive personal vendetta wrapped inside this corporate transaction. Why such a highly specific time and date? He asked, a knowing smirk, playing at the corners of his mouth. I stood up from the chair, buttoning my suit jacket with a crisp, fluid motion. Let us just say I am leaving a highly entertaining complimentary welcome package on the front lawn for your acquisition team. Do we have a deal? The CEO stood up and extended his hand. We have a deal, Zuri. Horizon Hospitality will take full aggressive possession of the estate at 2 p.m. on June 20th. I shook his hand, sealing the absolute destruction of my husband's fake empire. Marcus and Trent wanted to play high-stakes capitalism. I was about to show them exactly how the big leagues operated. The notification on my phone chimed with a crisp, definitive sound that cut through the silence of my temporary hotel suite. I picked up the device and opened my secure corporate banking app. Staring back at me was a pending wire transfer confirmation from Horizon Hospitality Group. The massive multi-million-dollar escrow deposit had officially hit my Onyx Properties account, a fortress of an account that Marcus had absolutely zero legal right to access or even view. I was busy playing financial dictator over a joint checking account with a balance of $200 while I was casually securing generational wealth before my morning coffee. I set the phone down and opened my laptop, navigating to the hidden administrative portal for the Lake Lanier Smart Home Security System. When Marcus demanded that I pack up my personal belongings and surrender the spare keys to his mother, he felt like an absolute conqueror. He truly thought he had successfully banished me from the premises. But because Marcus was fundamentally lazy and profoundly incompetent with technology, he never bothered to reset the master administrative access on the exterior security cameras. He assumed that changing the physical locks was enough to secure his stolen kingdom. I clicked on the live feed for the main driveway and leaned back in my chair, watching the absolute circus unfolding on my property. A convoy of massive, pristine white delivery trucks from Atlanta's most exclusive event rental company was currently clogging the long tree-lined entrance. Dozens of workers were swarming the lawn, carrying massive pieces of luxury furniture out of the trucks. I watched as men struggled under the weight of oversized imported Italian leather sectionals, hauling them up the steps and through the front doors. Another crew was carefully wheeling a state-of-the-art custom-built DJ booth down toward the private deep-water dock. Standing right in the middle of the manicured lawn was Trent. He was barking orders at the delivery crew, waving his hands around like a plantation overseer directing his workers. He wore his signature fleece vest and a pair of designer sunglasses, completely drunk on the illusion of his own power. He was spending a small fortune to completely stage a house he did not own, desperately trying to construct a facade of old-money luxury to impress the wealthy Boston investors he was actively defrauding. My phone buzzed on the desk, vibrating loudly against the wood. The caller ID flashed Chloe's name. I took a slow, deep breath, perfectly slipping back into the role of the defeated, humiliated wife before answering the call. "I hope you got all your cheap little project house trinkets out of the master suite," Chloe said, her voice dripping with a sickly sweet, condescending venom the second I answered. "Trent and I just arrived at the lake to supervise the delivery teams, and I have to say the space already feels so much cleaner without your heavy hair oils stinking up the bathrooms." I kept my voice quiet, injecting just the right amount of strained hesitation. "I packed up my personal items yesterday morning, Chloe. You did not have to call me just to rub this in. This is still my home." "Oh, Zuri, please stop being so dramatic," Chloe scoffed, the sound of her arrogant laughter echoing through the phone. "It is Marcus's home, and he graciously allowed Trent to elevate it. You really should be thanking my husband instead of whining. Have you seen the imported Italian furniture Trent ordered for the main living room? It is absolutely exquisite. We are replacing all of those brightly colored ethnic paintings you bought from those street vendors with actual, sophisticated contemporary art. Trent is bringing a level of high-class prestige to this property that your Decatur roots could never comprehend." I stared at the live camera feed on my screen, watching two workers carefully carry a massive, outrageously expensive crystal chandelier toward the back patio. Trent was pointing frantically, making sure they did not drop a single piece of the rental equipment. "Vivian is absolutely thrilled," Chloe continued, completely oblivious to my silence. "She always said your working-class aesthetic was going to drag Marcus down. Trent's family and his top-tier investors are flying in on private jets next week. These are people who own shipping companies and sit on hospital boards. They expect a specific standard of living, Zuri. We could not exactly host them on those discount sofas you bought when you were just a struggling house flipper." I let her talk. I let her spew every single classist, disrespectful microaggression she had been holding on to for years. She was so desperate to align herself with Trent's proximity to whiteness and wealth that she was actively helping him steal from her own sister-in-law. She genuinely believed that throwing thousands of dollars at expensive Italian leather and crystal fixtures would somehow scrub the black excellence right out of the walls I had built. "I hope Trent knows what he is doing," I said, keeping my tone carefully submissive. "Those hardwood floors are custom. Just make sure the delivery guys do not scratch them while they are moving all of your expensive things inside." Chloe let out a sharp, mocking sigh. "Do not worry about the floors, Zuri. We have a professional staging team handling everything. You just focus on staying quietly in Atlanta and letting the real professionals handle the business. Try not to ruin Marcus's mood while we are securing this family's financial future." "Go all out, Chloe," I replied softly, allowing a genuine razor-sharp smile to finally break across my face. "Spare no expense. I want you to decorate it beautifully. Make it absolutely perfect for your guests." I hung up the phone before she could say another word. I did not need to hear anything else. Chloe and Trent were completely blinded by their own arrogance, throwing a mountain of money into staging a luxury event on a property that was slipping right through their fingers. Less than 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. This time it was Desmond. I answered immediately, switching off the camera feed and grabbing a notepad. "Tell me the transaction is locked," I said, skipping any polite greetings. "Zuri, the CEO at Horizon Hospitality, does not play games when he wants an asset," Desmond said, his voice practically vibrating with professional triumph. The wire transfer did not just hit the escrow account. Horizon bypassed the standard financing contingencies completely. They wired the full $5.2 million directly into the secure trust. "The funds have cleared completely." I let out a long, slow breath, feeling the heavy, suffocating weight of Marcus's financial manipulation dissolve into nothing. "It is done then." "It is entirely done," Desmond confirmed. The title company expedited the final review this morning. The title company expedited the final review this morning. We used the quitclaim deed Marcus so graciously filed to clear any potential marital hurdles holding up the title transfer. The county clerk is fully prepared to stamp and record the new deed. Horizon Hospitality will officially and legally become the sole owner of the Lake Lanier estate at exactly 12 noon on June 20th. At that precise second, your company's name is removed from the property and Horizon assumes total corporate control. And the physical handover, I asked, needing to confirm the timeline of my trap. The CEO agreed to your exact terms, Desmond replied, a dark, knowing chuckle escaping him. Horizon's corporate security team, along with their regional property managers, are scheduled to arrive at the main gates at exactly 2 in the afternoon on June 20th to take physical possession of their new corporate asset. They have strict instructions to secure the perimeter and lock down the estate. I turned my attention back to the laptop, pulling the live camera feed up one more time. Trent was currently standing on my custom-built dock, enthusiastically shaking hands with a man delivering a massive commercial-grade outdoor catering grill. He was spending tens of thousands of dollars of his investors' money to transform the lake house into a 5-star corporate retreat. He was setting up luxury cabanas on the lawn, stocking the outdoor bars with premium liquor, and arranging for valet parking services. Excellent, I said, my voice dropping to a cool, lethal register. Let them keep working. Let Trent haul in every single piece of expensive imported furniture he can find. Let him drain his fraudulent investor funds to make the estate look like a palace. What are you going to do until the 20th? Desmond asked. I am going to sit back and watch them dig their own graves, I replied, staring at Trent's smug face on the high-definition camera feed. They think they are staging a luxury summit to impress the Boston elite. They have absolutely no idea that they are beautifully decorating a house that no longer belongs to them. Let them fill my buyer's property with all their expensive toys. I cannot wait to see Trent's face when he realizes he just financed the most expensive trespassing violation in the history of Atlanta. 2 days before the 20th. I returned to the Buckhead townhouse to collect the last of my personal documents. The air conditioning was running high, but the atmosphere inside the house was suffocating. I was in the middle of emptying my home office desk when the front door slammed open. Marcus marched down the hallway, his designer dress shoes striking the hardwood floors with heavy, aggressive thuds. He burst into my office holding a thick, crisp white envelope. It was already torn open. My eyes locked onto the bank logo printed in the corner. It was a formal notification from my private corporate bank regarding the restructuring of Onyx Properties and the massive incoming wire transfer. My heart skipped a single dangerous beat. If he had actually read the fine print, the entire operation would explode. But Marcus was not a man who read the fine print. He only read what confirmed his own biases. What is this, Zuri? He demanded, slapping the crumpled letter down onto my desk. He planted both hands on the wood, leaning over me with his chest puffed out, trying to use his physical presence to intimidate me. The letter clearly states that you are altering your account structures. It mentions wealth management protocols. Are you trying to hide a slush fund from me? Are you secretly moving marital assets right before Trent's luxury summit? I stared at the violated envelope. You opened my private business mail, Marcus. That is a federal offense. Do not talk to me about federal offenses when you are actively committing financial fraud against your own husband, he shouted, his voice echoing off the walls. I knew you were scheming. People from your background always try to hoard cash under the mattress when things get tough. You think because I froze your allowance that you can just secretly shift funds around behind my back. I am a financial analyst, Zuri. I know how to track hidden assets. I will call the Atlanta Police Department right now. I will report you for marital fraud. I will have the bank freeze every single account attached to your social security number, and I will leave you on the street with absolutely nothing. I was practically vibrating with rage, completely convinced he had just caught me orchestrating a massive financial crime. He thought the letter was proof that I was hoarding a secret stash of cash to sabotage his big weekend. He did not realize the letter was an automated security notice triggered by a $5.2 million cash deposit settling into my trust. I had to defuse his paranoia immediately. I needed to feed his massive, fragile ego until he choked on it. I let my shoulders slump, dropping the stack of files I was holding. I forced my breathing to become shallow and erratic, perfectly mimicking the panic of a woman who had just been backed into a corner. Call the bank. Marcus, I said, my voice shaking with perfectly manufactured defeat. Call them right now. Tell them to freeze everything. It will not make a difference. I pulled my smartphone from my pocket, unlocked the screen, and opened the banking app that connected to our joint account. The account he had so proudly locked down just days prior. I turned the screen around and shoved it toward his chest. Look at it, I said, letting a tear of frustration gather in the corner of my eye. Look at the balance. Marcus snatched the phone from my hand, his eyes darting to the screen. The bold numbers at the top read exactly $212.45. You locked the account, Marcus, I whispered, staring down at my hands. You cut off my credit line. You blocked my access to the property funds. The restructuring letter you just opened was a denial notice. My corporate account is completely tapped out from the raw materials I bought before you froze my credit. I tried to apply for an emergency commercial loan to cover my contractor fees, and the bank flagged my accounts because of the sudden lack of liquidity. I have absolutely nothing left for you to take. Marcus stared at the low balance on the screen. The anger that had been boiling in his eyes slowly melted away, replaced by a deep, repulsive wave of arrogant satisfaction. He genuinely believed he had bled me dry. He thought his financial maneuvering had completely crushed my business and stripped me of my independence. He handed my phone back to me, a cruel, victorious smirk stretching across his face. I tried to warn you, Tsuri, he said, his tone shifting from aggressive to patronizingly sympathetic. I told you that playing real estate mogul was a dangerous game. You did not have the financial literacy to manage those properties. You over-leveraged yourself buying imported marble when you should have been listening to my financial advice. This is exactly why Trent and I had to step in and take over the Lake Lanier estate. You were going to drive this family into bankruptcy. I kept my head bowed, digging my fingernails into my palms to keep from slapping the smug satisfaction right off his face. Trent is showing me how real wealth is generated. Marcus continued, walking over to my bookshelf and casually adjusting a framed photo. Trent's investors are bringing millions in capital to the table this weekend. They do not operate on credit cards and cheap commercial loans. They operate on legacy wealth. Maybe if you had learned how to properly submit to my leadership, you would not be sitting here with $200 to your name. He checked his expensive watch, completely dismissing my presence. I do not have time to deal with your financial ruin right now. I have to go to the tailor to pick up my custom suit for the summit. Trent's family is arriving from Boston tonight, and I need to look impeccable for the welcome dinner. Make sure you are packed and out of this house by tomorrow morning. I do not want to risk Trent's investors dropping by and seeing you moping around. Marcus turned on his heel and walked out of the office, his ego completely satisfied. I stood perfectly still, listening to him hum a cheerful tune as he walked down the hall to the master bedroom. He was untouchable in his own mind. He was the king of the castle, the financial genius who had just put his unruly working-class wife in her place. I waited 5 full minutes before quietly stepping out of my office. I walked silently down the carpeted hallway and paused just outside the master bedroom door. Marcus was standing in his massive walk-in closet, loudly complaining on the phone to his mother about the dry cleaner. He had left his iPad resting on the plush velvet ottoman at the foot of the bed. The screen was lit up with a fresh notification. I stepped into the room, moving with the silent precision of a ghost, and glanced down at the bright display. It was a message sent directly to the Lanier Legacy Wealth Group chat. Marcus had typed it just seconds before making his phone call. The message read, "Do not worry about Zuri causing any problems this weekend. I just confronted her. She is completely broke and begging for commercial loans. I bled her dry. Tomorrow we officially take over Lake Lanier and lock in the Boston investors. We won." Chloe responded immediately with a string of celebration emojis. Vivian followed up with, "Thank God. Maybe now she will realize she is nothing without this family." Trent simply replied, "See you at the lake, partner." I stared at the messages, a slow, dangerous heat rising in my chest. They were celebrating my destruction. They were actively cheering for my poverty, entirely convinced that they had successfully robbed me of everything I had worked my entire life to build. They were popping champagne on the deck of a sinking ship. I did not touch the iPad. I left it exactly where it was and walked back to my temporary guest room. I opened my designer suitcase, bypassing the neutral, unassuming clothes I had packed to maintain my facade. I reached into the back of my closet and pulled out a custom-tailored crimson-red power suit. The fabric was sharp-structured and unapologetically bold. It was the suit I wore when I closed my very first $1 million commercial deal. It was the armor of a woman who did not ask for permission. I carefully folded the vibrant red suit and placed it right at the top of my suitcase. Marcus wanted me out of the house. He wanted me to disappear into the shadows so he could play billionaire with his racist brother-in-law. He thought tomorrow was his coronation. He had no idea that tomorrow was his execution. I zipped the suitcase shut, the metallic sound sharp and final in the quiet room. I had less than 24 hours until Horizon Hospitality took total possession of the estate. Let Marcus pick up his custom-tailored suit. Let Trent welcome his wealthy Boston family. Let Vivian brag to her country club friends about her new lake house. I was going to let them put on their very best clothes for the slaughter. The morning of June 20th broke over Lake Lanier with a thick, humid heat that clung to the water, but the atmosphere around my property was practically vibrating with artificial prestige. I parked my car on a slight elevation just a few blocks down the road from the main gates, watching the spectacular circus unfold through a pair of dark designer sunglasses. Trent had absolutely outdone himself in the worst way possible. He had transformed my quiet, sustainable eco-estate into a flashy, over-the-top playground for the wealthy. The sprawling green lawn of the property was completely overflowing with imported luxury vehicles. Gleaming black Mercedes, silver Bentleys, and aggressively loud sports cars lined the custom-paved driveway that I had personally poured my own sweat and capital into designing. Over 100 wealthy, predominantly white investors from Boston milled around the property, wearing expensive linen suits and holding flutes of top-tier champagne. They were picking at gourmet hors d'oeuvres carried by a fleet of hired servers who navigated through a maze of white luxury cabanas set up near the water. Trent had spared absolutely no expense utilizing the fraudulent funds he had collected from these exact investors to fund the illusion of his own generational wealth. Down by the infinity pool, Vivian was holding court like the reigning monarch of a kingdom she had absolutely no part in building. I adjusted my rearview mirror, watching her through the distance. She wore an absurdly wide-brimmed sun hat and a flowing, expensive linen dress, laughing loudly with a group of older investors. She was pointing a manicured finger toward the custom timber beams of the main house, her voice carrying over the gentle hum of the live jazz band Trent had hired to set the upscale mood. She was actively spinning an elaborate, pathetic fairy tale, bragging to anyone who would listen about how the property had been a beloved family sanctuary for generations. She was standing firmly on soil, purchased by a black woman from Decatur, shamelessly claiming it was the legacy of a family that could barely afford to keep their own credit scores above water. Chloe stood right beside her mother, playing the perfect refined hostess. She was smiling and nodding at the investors, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband had funded this entire lavish charade on the promise of exploiting real estate assets he did not legally possess. They were so desperate for proximity to this Boston money that they had completely sold their souls to a man who viewed them as nothing more than convenient props for his grift. And then there was Marcus. He was standing near the massive outdoor bar, nervously adjusting his custom-tailored suit, trying desperately to blend in with the corporate sharks Trent had invited. He looked incredibly proud of himself, sipping a top-shelf bourbon and soaking in the proximity to wealth. He looked like a man who genuinely believed he had secured his financial salvation. He thought banishing his wife, mocking her roots, and stealing her portfolio was the ultimate power move that would erase his massive secret cryptocurrency debts. He was smiling at Trent, unaware that the very ground he was standing on had already been sold out from under his expensive leather shoes. I checked the dashboard clock. It was exactly 1:45 in the afternoon. The timeline was absolute perfection. I looked down at my outfit, straightening the lapels of the custom-tailored crimson-red power suit I had packed specifically for this occasion. The vibrant red fabric was sharp-structured and unapologetically bold. It was the armor of a woman who did not ask for permission and certainly did not tolerate being treated like a squatter in her own life. I shifted my black Porsche into gear and glided smoothly down the road. The powerful engine hummed a low, threatening growl as I approached the massive wrought iron gates of my estate. Trent had set up a temporary security checkpoint right at the entrance to ensure the exclusivity of his event. 3 burly private security guards wearing tight black polo shirts and earpieces stood behind a row of bright orange plastic barricades. They were actively checking names off a digital clipboard, acting as the ultimate gatekeepers to a property they had no legal right to occupy. I pulled the Porsche right up to the barricade, the dark-tinted windows reflecting the harsh midday sun. One of the security guards stepped forward immediately, holding up his hand in a commanding, aggressive halt gesture. He marched over to my driver's side door, tapping the glass hard with his knuckles. He clearly expected me to immediately roll down the window and submit to his authority. I did not roll the window down. I did not acknowledge his presence. I simply stared straight ahead, my hands resting lightly on the leather steering wheel. The guard shouted something muffled through the thick glass, his face twisting with severe irritation when I completely ignored him. He pointed toward the exit road, making a dismissive shooing motion, clearly assuming I was just a lost local or an uninvited guest who did not belong anywhere near a high-net-worth corporate summit. I thought I was a disruption to the white elite gathering inside. I picked up my phone from the center console. The Bluetooth system connected instantly through the car speakers, and I pressed the speed dial for Desmond. He answered on the very first ring, the background noise of heavy idling diesel engines humming loudly through the line. "Are we in position?" I asked, my voice calm, cool, and completely devoid of any mercy. "We are staged, exactly a quarter-mile down the county highway," Zuri Desmond replied, the fierce anticipation ringing clearly in his words. Horizon Hospitality sent their top-tier corporate security detachment. We also have 2 heavily armed vehicles from the county sheriff's department ready to execute the trespass warrants. The deed transfer was finalized and stamped at 12 noon sharp. You no longer own that property. Horizon Hospitality is officially taking possession in exactly 10 minutes. I looked through my windshield past the arrogant security guard actively hitting the hood of my car and locked my eyes on the distant figure of Trent. He was currently standing on the patio, raising a crystal glass of champagne to toast his wealthy investors, completely secure in his fraudulent empire. They took the bait. I said, a slow, razor-sharp smile spreading across my face. Bring the force down here right now. Let us show them exactly how a real corporate takeover operates. I disconnected the call without waiting for a response. The security guard was now slapping both of his open palms against my window, his face red with anger as he demanded that I reverse my vehicle off the property line. Instead, I gripped the steering wheel tightly, shifted the car into drive, and slammed my stiletto heel entirely down on the accelerator. The Porsche roared to life with a deafening, explosive sound that violently shattered the upscale, refined ambiance of the event. Before the guard could even react to jump out of the way, the car surged forward like a missile. I smashed straight through the orange plastic barricades, sending them flying across the pavement in a loud, aggressive shower of shattered plastic. The heavy tires of my car tore violently from the paved driveway directly onto the pristine, manicured grass, kicking up thick clumps of expensive turf and mud. The live, upbeat jazz music cut off abruptly into a chaotic, piercing screech of feedback as the band scrambled out of the way in sheer panic. Screams and gasps erupted from the wealthy investors as they dropped their champagne flutes, diving backward over the expensive rental furniture to avoid my path. I did not hit the brakes until I was parked dead center in the middle of the front lawn, entirely ruining the perfect, pristine aesthetic Trent had paid tens of thousands of dollars to create. The engine idled loudly in the sudden, shocked silence of the crowd. I threw the car into park and looked directly through the windshield at Marcus, Vivian, Chloe, and Trent, who were all staring at me with wide eyes and expressions of pure, unadulterated horror. The heavy door of my Porsche closed behind me with a solid, echoing thud, The crisp snap of my stiletto hitting the pavement rang out like a gunshot across the suddenly silent estate. I stepped out slowly, standing to my full height, smoothing the lapels of my tailored crimson suit. The vibrant red fabric cut through their sea of muted, wealthy pastels like a blade. The air smelled of expensive catering, spilled champagne, and the raw, earthy scent of the freshly torn grass trapped in my wheel wells. Over 100 pairs of eyes were locked onto me. The wealthy Boston investors Trent had promised a private generational family estate were now staring at a woman who had just violently dismantled their illusion. Vivian broke the silence. The refined, soft-spoken matriarch facade she had been performing all afternoon completely shattered. She shrieked a loud, guttural sound that made several investors physically flinch. "What in the absolute hell do you think you are doing?" Vivian screamed, storming across the patio with her arms flailing. Her wide-brimmed sun hat slipped backward, exposing the wild, furious panic in her eyes. She pointed a shaking finger at me, then whirled around to face her son. "Marcus, get this uncultured trash off my property right now. I told you to keep her in the city. Call the guards and throw this woman into the street before she ruins everything." Marcus was already moving. His face was a dark mottled purple, completely consumed by the humiliation of having his perfectly constructed lie exposed in front of the banking colleagues he was so desperate to impress. He signaled frantically to the private security guards I had just bypassed, waving them over to physically remove me. "Zuri, have you lost your mind?" Marcus yelled, marching down the shallow stone steps toward the lawn. He stopped a few feet away from me, trying to maintain a posture of dominance while his voice trembled with sheer panic. "You are actively destroying a multi-million-dollar corporate event. You are trespassing on a property that is currently under exclusive management. Get back in your car and leave right now, or I swear to God I will have you arrested and thrown in a cell." I did not even look at him. My eyes were fixed entirely on Trent. Trent pushed past Marcus, stepping right into my personal space. His face was flushed with the arrogant, blinding rage of a white man who had never been publicly challenged by a black woman in his entire life. He towered over me, using his height to try and force me to shrink back. He reeked of expensive scotch and unearned confidence. "Who exactly do you think you are?" Trent spat, his voice dropping into a low, threatening register designed to put me in my place. "You think because you flipped a few properties in the ghetto, you can show up here and act like you belong in this tier. You do not belong here, Zuri. You are a disruptive, classless liability. I am the authorized property manager of this estate." Marcus signed the legal paperwork granting me total operational control. "I have investors here who manage global portfolios, and you are acting like a wild animal tearing up the grass." He stepped even closer, jabbing his finger in the air mere inches from my face. "The police are already on their way, Zuri. My security team hit the panic button the second you crashed through those barricades. You are going to be arrested for destruction of property, reckless driving, and felony trespassing. You are going to jail, and Marcus and I are going to sue you for every dime of revenue you just cost this event." The private security guards finally caught up, jogging heavily across the lawn. They formed a tight semicircle behind Trent and Marcus, resting their hands intimidatingly on their utility belts. Chloe ran down the steps right behind them, clutching her designer dress, looking between me and the investors who were now pulling out their phones to record the chaos. "You are so jealous!" Chloe hissed, her voice shrill and desperate. "You saw Trent bringing real money and real prestige to this family, and you could not stand it. You had to come here and ruin my anniversary because you are a miserable, bitter woman who cannot accept that Marcus outgrew you." I stood perfectly still, entirely unbothered by the wall of angry, panicked people trying to intimidate me on my own driveway. I looked at the security guards who were waiting for Trent to give them the physical order to grab my arms. "If any of you lay a single finger on my suit, I will personally ensure you never work in private security again," I said, my voice echoing with absolute icy authority. The guards hesitated, glancing at each other. There was a dangerous certainty in my tone that made them question Trent's actual authority. They were hired muscle, but they were not stupid enough to physically assault a woman who carried herself like she owned the very air they were breathing. Trent scoffed, running a hand through his perfectly styled hair. "Do not listen to her. She is a delusional, bitter ex who cannot accept that her husband legally handed over control of this property. Grab her arms and pull her away from the guests. I did not flinch. I did not step back. I slowly raised my left hand, pulling back the crisp crimson cuff of my jacket to expose the face of my diamond Cartier watch. The second hand ticked smoothly across the custom dial. "It is exactly 2 o'clock in the afternoon," I stated clearly, letting my arm drop back to my side. I looked directly into Trent's furious eyes. "The police are indeed coming, Trent. You are absolutely right about that. But you are not the one who called them." Before Trent could open his mouth to respond, a sound pierced the humid afternoon air. It started as a distant wail echoing off the surface of the lake. Within seconds, it amplified into a deafening overlapping chorus of blaring sirens. Everyone on the lawn turned their heads toward the main road. The heavy, syncopated roar of multiple heavy-duty engines surged down the private drive. The investors gasped and backed away as 4 massive blacked-out SUVs bearing the Horizon Hospitality corporate security insignia aggressively turned the corner. They were flanked by 3 marked county sheriff cruisers, their blue and red lights flashing violently, casting harsh reflections against the pristine white rental cabanas. The vehicles did not stop at the gate. They drove straight onto the property with coordinated military precision, boxing in my Porsche and forming a tactical barrier between the terrified guests and the main house. Marcus staggered backward, his mouth hanging open in pure shock. Vivian clamped a hand over her mouth, her eyes darting frantically between the police cruisers and the wealthy investors who were now actively backing away from her. Trent crossed his arms, trying to maintain his authoritative posture, though I could see a bead of sweat tracing down his temple. He turned to the lead sheriff cruiser, expecting the officers to jump out and arrest me for trespassing. He genuinely believed that the arrival of law enforcement was his ultimate salvation. He thought the system would automatically protect him. Instead, the heavy doors of the lead black SUV opened first. A team of men wearing dark tailored suits and earpieces stepped out in perfect unison. Behind them, the county sheriffs exited their vehicles, resting their hands on their duty belts, completely ignoring Trent's frantic gestures. From the passenger side of the second SUV, my lawyer Desmond stepped out onto the grass. He was holding a thick leather folder, his expression set in a mask of absolute professional lethality. Following right behind Desmond was the chief legal counsel for Horizon Hospitality, a tall, imposing man who looked at the lavish party setup with profound corporate disgust. "What is the meaning of this?" Trent demanded, marching toward the police officers and completely ignoring the corporate lawyers. "Officers, I am the authorized manager of this property. I demand that you arrest this woman immediately. She crashed through our security barriers and is threatening our VIP guests." The lead sheriff held up a hand, completely halting Trent in his tracks. "Sir, I suggest you step back and remain quiet. We are not here for her. We are here to assist the legal owners of this estate in executing a formal property reclamation." Trent froze, his arrogant scowl faltering. "Legal owners? What are you talking about? Marcus owns this house." Marcus lunged forward, desperate to save face in front of the murmuring crowd of Boston investors. He frantically pulled a folded piece of paper from the inner pocket of his suit jacket. It was the same generic, incorrectly filed document he had waved in my face the night before. "Officer," he yelled, his voice cracking with panic. "I have the paperwork right here. I am Marcus. I am the husband. This property is a marital asset. I have the signed documentation proving I have equitable control over this land. You need to remove my wife right now before she ruins my corporate event." I smiled, a slow, predatory expression that finally made the blood drain entirely from Marcus' face. The stage was perfectly set. The audience was captive. It was time to pull the trigger. For several seconds after Marcus raised the paper, nobody moved. The sirens had stopped, but the pressure on the lawn only intensified. Horizon's security team remained spread across the property line, while the county deputies held position behind them, giving the scene the stillness of a courtroom before a verdict. The lead sheriff did not reach for me. He simply held out one hand toward Horizon's legal representative. The representative stepped forward with a leather folder already open. He removed a certified copy of the newly recorded warranty deed, the purchase agreement, and the active trespass notice, then handed the documents to the sheriff. Desmond stood beside him, allowing the paperwork to do what angry speeches never could. Marcus tried to talk over them. He insisted the lake house was a marital asset, that a husband could not be excluded from family property, and that I was staging all of this because I was bitter about being told to stay away. Every sentence made him sound less powerful. The sheriff flipped through the documents without reacting to Marcus's expensive suit banking title or volume. Trent moved closer, suddenly less interested in threatening me and more interested in the papers. His eyes kept jumping between the legal representative and the investors behind him. I saw genuine fear break through his arrogance. If Marcus's authority disappeared, Trent's $10,000 a night retreat stopped looking exclusive and started looking like a very expensive lie. Vivian whispered something sharp to Chloe, then tried to recover her hostess smile for the people watching. It did not work. Too many phones were already raised. Too many guests had heard the words legal owners and property reclamation. Marcus finally thrust his paper toward the sheriff again. "Look at this," he demanded. "This is the document that gives me control. My wife signed the paperwork. The county accepted it. Trent relied on it when he organized this event. She cannot sell the house behind my back and pretend none of this is legal." The sheriff glanced at the page, then at Desmond. Desmond looked at Marcus with the calm expression of a man watching someone volunteer evidence against himself. "That document is exactly why the title company was able to clear the sale," Desmond said. Marcus blinked. His anger stalled. Horizon's legal representative pointed to the chain of title attached behind the new deed. The county record showed Onyx Properties as the sole owner before the sale. The purchase agreement showed $5.2 million paid in full. The warranty deed showed Horizon as the new owner as of noon that day. And the trespass notice authorized the company's security team to clear the property at 2 o'clock exactly as scheduled. The timeline was clean. The sale had been negotiated and funded before the event, the deed had been recorded at noon, and Horizon's physical possession began at 2. There was no ownership gap Marcus could exploit, and no emergency marital right waiting for him to invoke. Trent's face tightened. He turned toward Marcus. "You told me you controlled the property." "I do," Marcus snapped too quickly. He lifted the paper again, gripping it hard enough to wrinkle the edges. "She signed this during tax season. This proves it." Desmond finally stepped closer. "No, Marcus," he said. "It proves something. Just not what you think it proves." I watched Marcus search for a way to force the scene back into the story he had rehearsed. His authority had always depended on everyone accepting his version before they checked the paperwork. Now the paperwork was sitting in the sheriff's hands. I pushed away from the hood of my Porsche and walked toward him at an unhurried pace. I did not need to shout. I did not need to explain how many years I had spent building the estate. All of that was already written into documents Marcus had been too arrogant to understand. He held the crumpled form up between us like a shield. I looked at the top line, then back into his eyes. Behind him, the investors had stopped whispering. They were finally listening for facts instead of titles, money, or performance. "Read the top of the paper you are holding, Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through the humid air with absolute, unapologetic clarity. "Read the bold letters at the top of the document you have been proudly waving around all week." Marcus sneered at me, completely convinced of his own superiority. He unfolded the paper and held it up for the sheriff and the lawyers to see. "It is a property deed transferring control to my name. I filed it during tax season. I secured my half of the marital wealth while you were busy playing with your little construction projects." "You are a financial analyst, Marcus, and yet your reading comprehension is truly pathetic," I replied, shaking my head slowly. "That is not a warranty deed. That is not a grant deed. That is a quitclaim deed. And when you filed it during tax season because you were too lazy to hire a real lawyer, you downloaded a cheap template from the internet and filled it out completely backward." The smug confidence on Marcus' face faltered for the very first time. His eyes darted down to the paper in his hands. "You put your name on the grantor line, Marcus," I explained, enunciating every single syllable so the wealthy Boston investors hanging on my every word could hear exactly how incompetent he was. "You legally listed yourself as the person surrendering the rights. You listed Onyx Properties LLC, my solely owned company, as the grantee. You did not secure your ownership. You explicitly and permanently signed away any and all equitable claims you might have ever had to my company and to this estate. You legally disinherited yourself. A collective shocked murmur rippled through the crowd of investors. Several men in expensive linen suits began pulling out their phones, realizing the severe legal implications of what they were witnessing. That is impossible. Marcus stammered, his hands beginning to shake as his eyes scanned the legal jargon he had previously ignored. The paper rattled loudly in his grip. I filed this to take control. I am the head of the household. The county clerk accepted the filing. The county clerk accepted it because it was a legally binding surrender of your rights, Desmond interjected smoothly, twisting the knife. You officially told the state of Georgia that you have absolutely zero financial or operational interest in the Lake Lanier estate. Because of your incredibly generous legal filing, Zuri maintained 100% unilateral control of the property, and 48 hours ago, she locked this $5.2 million all-cash sale with Horizon Hospitality. The deed was recorded at noon today, and Horizon's physical possession began at 2. Marcus dropped the paper. It fluttered down to the torn grass, landing right next to my designer's stiletto. The reality of his catastrophic failure hit him with the force of a freight train. He had spent weeks plotting with his mother and his white brother-in-law, dripping with classist arrogance, mocking my background and demanding I remove my personal belongings from a house he thought he had stolen. I had frozen my bank account over a $200 balance while I was silently negotiating a multi-million-dollar corporate buyout entirely outside of his reach. He was absolutely completely ruined. From the patio, Trent suddenly shoved his way through the crowd of panicked investors. His face was stark white, drenched in a sudden cold sweat. His arrogant white savior complex had completely vanished, replaced by the sheer, unadulterated terror of a man who realized he was about to face federal prison time. Sold. Trent yelled, his voice cracking violently as he stumbled onto the lawn. What do you mean the property is sold? That is completely impossible. I am hosting an exclusive corporate retreat here for the entire weekend. My family traveled down from Boston for this specific event. You are trespassing on Horizon Hospitality property, Trent, the chief legal counsel, stated firmly, pointing a sharp finger at him. Our security teams are initiating a full lockdown. Every single piece of unauthorized rental furniture, staging equipment, and catering material currently on this lawn will be impounded. I cannot leave, Trent shrieked, his pristine facade shattering into absolute hysteria. He grabbed his own hair, pacing frantically in a small circle. I collected $10,000 per head from these people. I told them this was my private family estate. I guaranteed them a luxury weekend. I have over $1 million tied up in this event. If I do not deliver this retreat, they are going to demand full refunds. I spent the deposit money on the imported furniture and the catering contracts. I am completely broke. The silence that followed his frantic outburst was deafening. The wealthy Boston investors who had previously viewed Trent as a rising star in the cryptocurrency sector were now staring at him with absolute predatory rage. Trent had just publicly admitted to running an illegal, fraudulent event on stolen property using their hard-earned capital. I let out a slow, dark chuckle that echoed across the lawn. So that is how you run your highly sophisticated corporate operations, Trent, I said, a razor-sharp smile playing on my lips. You sell fake VIP tickets to property you do not own to pay off the massive debts you are too cowardly to admit you have. You try to erase a black woman from her own land so you can cosplay as a wealthy real estate mogul. I turned my back on Trent and addressed the crowd of furious investors, gesturing expansively to the corporate security teams currently surrounding the perimeter of the estate. Welcome to the newest commercial acquisition of the Horizon Hospitality Group, I announced, projecting my voice with effortless command. You have exactly 10 minutes to gather your personal belongings, get in your expensive imported vehicles, and vacate this corporate property before the county sheriffs begin making arrests for criminal trespassing. Please direct all of your refund requests and civil lawsuits to Trent's legal team. I am sure he will be incredibly eager to explain how he defrauded every single one of you. The moment my words registered with the crowd of Boston elites, the pristine atmosphere of the lawn completely dissolved into absolute predatory chaos. These were not casual vacationers. These were ruthless venture capitalists, hedge fund managers and institutional investors, who did not tolerate being made fools of, especially not by a desperate grifter playing with their capital. A tall, red-faced investor in a custom linen suit lunged forward, grabbing Trent by the lapels of his expensive fleece vest. "Give me my $10,000 back right now!" The man roared, his voice cracking like a whip across the estate. "You sold us a fake summit on stolen land. I wired that money directly into your holding account yesterday morning. If that transfer is not reversed by the time my plane lands back in Massachusetts, I will personally see to it that you are indicted for wire fraud." Trent violently shoved the man away, his face slick with a terrified, greasy sweat. His carefully crafted white savior persona completely shattered, leaving behind nothing but a cornered, cowardly scam artist. He frantically held his hands up, stumbling backward toward the swimming pool, as more investors closed in around him like a pack of starving wolves. "It is not my fault," Trent shrieked, pointing a shaking finger directly at Marcus and Chloe. "They lied to me." Marcus explicitly showed me the property records. He assured me he had total legal control over this asset. Chloe verified it. "They brought me down here under false pretenses. They are the ones who defrauded you, not me. I am a victim in this too." Chloe gasped, stepping back as if her husband had just slapped her across the face. She stared at Trent, her jaw unhinged, watching the man she had leveraged her entire identity on throw her straight under the bus to save his own skin. Marcus tried to intervene, raising his hands to placate the furious crowd, but another investor shoved him hard in the chest, sending him stumbling into a tray of crystal champagne flutes that shattered loudly against the stone patio. Vivian could not handle the destruction of her imaginary high society empire. The sheer horror of watching her wealthy white guests turn on her family was too much for her fragile status-obsessed ego to process. Her knees buckled completely. She collapsed onto the torn, muddy grass, ruining her designer dress. She reached out desperately, trying to grab the pant leg of a prominent hospital board member as he stormed past her toward the exit. "Please," Vivian pleaded, her voice a pathetic, high-pitched whine. "This is just a massive misunderstanding. Zuri is deeply unwell. We can still salvage the weekend. Please do not leave like this." The investor yanked his leg away from her grasp with an expression of pure, unadulterated disgust. "Do not ever contact me again, Vivian," he spat. "Your family sold us a private retreat you did not own and stood here acting as if we were the problem. I am leaving, and my attorneys will deal with Trent. Stay away from me." Vivian let out a strangled, breathless sob, burying her face in her hands as the last shreds of her fake Atlanta old money performance burned to the ground. While the investors stormed off the property, dragging their designer luggage behind them, the Horizon Hospitality security team wasted absolutely no time executing their clearance orders. The chief legal counsel gave a sharp, decisive nod, and a dozen broad-shouldered men in dark suits moved in like a demolition crew. They were not there to carefully pack up Trent's expensive event. They were there to forcibly remove unauthorized garbage from a multi-million-dollar corporate asset. I watched with deep, satisfying clarity as two security guards grabbed one of the massive imported Italian leather sectionals Trent had bragged about just hours prior. They did not carry it gently. They dragged it ruthlessly across the stone patio, scratching the expensive leather, and hauled it straight down the driveway. They hoisted it over the broken plastic barricades and tossed it directly onto the dirt shoulder of the county road. It landed with a heavy, sickening crunch, completely abandoning it as roadside trash. "Hey!" Trent screamed, trying to run toward the driveway but finding his path blocked by a county sheriff who firmly placed a hand on his chest. "You cannot do that. That is rented furniture. I put a $40,000 deposit down for those pieces. That DJ equipment is custom-made." The security team ignored him entirely. They ripped the wiring out of the custom DJ booth, grabbed the speakers, and hauled them out to the street. The elegant white luxury cabanas were dismantled with brutal efficiency. The expensive silk drapery tossed into a disorganized heap on the asphalt. They were clearing my property with the ruthless speed of a corporate machine, stripping away every single piece of fake luxury Trent and Marcus had brought onto my land. Chloe could not take it anymore. The sight of her entire glamorous anniversary retreat being literally thrown into the gutter broke whatever was left of her arrogant spirit. She ran across the lawn, her expensive heels sinking into the mud, and threw herself toward me. She stopped just short of my personal space, tears streaming down her face, completely abandoning the condescending tone she had used on the phone just that morning. "Zuri, please," Chloe sobbed, her hands clasped together in front of her chest, like she was begging for her life. "Please make them stop. You have to call off the lawyers. If Trent loses those event deposits, we are entirely bankrupt. He took money from the wrong people. Those Boston investors will literally destroy his career and send him to federal prison for wire fraud. You are destroying this family over a petty grudge. Please, we are begging you." I stood my ground, my posture perfectly straight, my crimson suit immaculate against the backdrop of their absolute ruin. I looked down at Chloe, analyzing the desperate, pathetic tears streaming from her eyes. She wanted grace. She wanted mercy. She wanted the black woman she had spent years tearing down to suddenly play the role of the forgiving sacrificial mule to save her white husband from the consequences of his own criminal actions. I tilted my head slightly, maintaining an expression of pure, unbreakable ice. "You just told me this morning that I lacked an upper-class aesthetic." "Chloe," I said, my voice projecting clearly over the sounds of her expensive rental furniture being thrown onto the street. "You said my working-class background was an embarrassment. Well, you were absolutely right about one thing. People with real upper-class wealth do not waste their time cleaning up trash. I do not do manual labor anymore. I just sell the entire dumpster and let the new owners take out the garbage." Chloe let out a devastated wail, burying her face in her hands as she realized I was completely, utterly immovable. I was not going to save her. I was not going to save Trent. I was going to stand there and watch them drown in the flood they had created. Marcus, having watched his sister beg and fail, completely lost the very last shred of his sanity. His face was a mask of pure, unhinged desperation. He realized that the house was gone, the investors were gone, and his secret cryptocurrency debts were about to become incredibly public. He reached into his suit jacket and yanked out his smartphone, his fingers trembling violently as he gripped the device. "You think you won?" Marcus roared, his voice cracking as he pointed the phone directly at me. "You think you can just secretly sell a marital asset for $5 million and walk away with the cash? You are legally married to me, Zuri. Every single dime of that sale is subject to equitable distribution. You just funded my payout. I am calling the bank fraud department right now. I am going to report this transaction as marital theft. I will freeze your entire corporate account right this second, and you will not be able to touch a single penny of that money until the divorce courts hand half of it directly to me." He began furiously punching numbers into his phone, breathing heavily, completely consumed by the delusion that he still retained some sliver of financial control over my life. He thought his phone call was going to be the ultimate counterattack. He thought he was about to lock away my $5 million. He had absolutely no idea that his desperate phone call to the bank was exactly the final move I had anticipated, the very action that would permanently seal his own doom. Marcus holds his phone high in the air, ensuring the speakerphone volume is turned all the way up, so every single county sheriff, corporate security guard, and furious investor on the lawn can hear him reclaim his stolen manhood. He connects directly to the premium fraud prevention hotline at his corporate bank. He actually puffs his chest out, adjusting his tie as a customer service representative answers the line. He aggressively states his name, flashing his mid-level corporate title like it is a badge of absolute authority. He loudly declares that he is reporting a massive multi-million-dollar case of marital theft and corporate embezzlement. He demands that the bank instantly freeze all funds associated with my name and Onyx properties. He tells the representative that I have secretly liquidated a shared marital asset and am currently attempting to launder $5 million in cash to hide it from divorce proceedings. He genuinely believes that using a few banking buzzwords in front of law enforcement will make him look like a powerful financial genius. The sheriffs standing nearby do not look impressed. They look at Marcus like he is a complete liability. The bank representative on the speakerphone sounds incredibly confused, asking Marcus to verify his security questions and provide the routing numbers for the accounts he wishes to freeze. Marcus proudly rattles off his own social security number and demands they lock down every single corporate profile linked to my identity. I do not interrupt him. I do not shout or try to snatch the phone from his hand. I stand perfectly still in my crimson suit, watching a foolish man wrap a rope around his own neck and pull it tight. When Marcus finally finishes his frantic, arrogant demands, I pull my own phone from my pocket. I do not need to dial a number. I have kept Desmond on an active silent call the entire time. I press the speaker button on my screen and hold my phone up. Desmond's voice booms through the speakers, cutting through the humid afternoon air with the lethal, unapologetic precision of a master corporate litigator. He does not address Marcus. He addresses the bank representative currently listening on Marcus's phone. Desmond clearly and calmly states his full name, his state bar license number, and his official capacity as the retained legal counsel for Onyx Properties. He informs the bank representative that the man currently yelling on their fraud hotline is knowingly and maliciously submitting a false report to manipulate a legal, fully vetted commercial real estate transaction. Marcus opens his mouth to shout over him, but Desmond's voice commands absolute authority. Desmond informs the bank that Marcus has zero legal standing, zero authorized access, and zero equitable claim to the Onyx Properties corporate accounts. He states that the $5.2 million Marcus is attempting to freeze is securely parked in an independent commercial trust that Marcus cannot even view, let alone restrict. But Desmond is not finished. He is just getting warmed up. Since we are currently on a recorded federal banking line, Desmond announces, his tone dripping with calculated menace, I would like to officially flag the caller Marcus for an immediate compliance review. The man demanding a freeze on my client's assets is currently drowning in $80,000 of undisclosed cryptocurrency debt. Furthermore, he has been actively coordinating with a third-party Trent to receive a $30,000 wire transfer funded by illegal, fraudulent ticket sales for an event hosted on stolen property. Marcus is actively attempting to use this bank's fraud department to extort my client and cover up his own financial insolvency. The color completely drains from Marcus's face. His hand begins to shake so violently that he nearly drops his phone. He stammers frantically, trying to tell the bank representative to cancel the call, but it is entirely too late. The damage is permanently done. You see, Marcus forgot the most basic rule of working in the financial sector. When you call a federal banking institution and falsely accuse a multi-million-dollar corporate entity of money laundering, while you yourself are hiding massive unregulated crypto debts, you do not freeze the corporation. You trigger a massive automated security sweep on your own profile. The bank representative on the phone goes deadly silent. For a few agonizing seconds, the only sound on the lawn is the heavy breathing of the furious investors and the idling engines of the sheriff cruisers. Then a sharp, piercing chime rings out from Marcus's phone. A second later, a push notification flashes across his screen. Then another. Then another. Desmond lets out a sharp, victorious laugh over the speaker. Did you really think the bank was going to lock down a highly secure, heavily vetted $5 million corporate trust? Just because a bitter broke husband threw a temper tantrum, Desmond asks, mocking Marcus with absolute perfection. The bank's anti-money laundering algorithms do not care about your fragile ego, Marcus. They care about risk. And right now, you are the biggest financial risk on their radar. Your false fraud report just acted as a tripwire. Marcus stares down at his phone screen in pure, unadulterated horror. The automated notifications are flooding his device. His premium credit cards have been instantly suspended. His personal checking account has been locked. His employee banking privileges have been entirely revoked, pending a thorough internal investigation by his own employer. He tried to cut off my financial survival, and instead, the bank algorithm instantly flagged his suspicious debt ratios and completely severed his access to the financial system. He is officially totally broke. But the absolute carnage does not stop with Marcus. Across the lawn, Trent pulls his own phone out of the pocket of his expensive fleece vest. His hands are trembling so badly he can barely unlock the screen. The automated banking sweep triggered by Marcus's frantic phone call has traced the anticipated wire transfers directly back to Trent's holding accounts. Trent stares at his screen, his mouth falling open as he reads a notification from his elite brokerage firm. His corporate crypto accounts and his personal investment funds have been completely frozen due to suspected wire fraud and unauthorized commercial activity. And right beneath that banking notification is a fresh, urgent email from Trent's personal legal counsel. The subject line is written in all capital letters. The wealthy Boston investors standing just a few feet away from him did not waste a single second. While Trent was busy arguing with the police, their own aggressive legal teams had already pushed a massive financially ruinous class action lawsuit through the electronic filing system. They are suing Trent for fraud, deceptive business practices, and grand larceny. Trent reads the email, the reality of his complete destruction finally crashing down on his shoulders. He is going to lose his business. He is going to lose his reputation in Boston. He is looking at years of grueling federal litigation and highly probable jail time. The arrogant white savior cryptocurrency bro who thought he could strut onto my property, drink my private wine, and treat me like trash is suddenly stripped of every single ounce of his unearned power. His legs simply give out beneath him. Trent drops hard to his knees right there on the muddy, torn-up grass. He drops his phone, staring blankly at the dirt, completely paralyzed by the catastrophic collapse of his entire fake empire. He does not scream. He does not fight. He just kneels in the mud, a pathetic, broken man who finally messed with the wrong black woman. Marcus watched Trent collapse. The realization that there was no white savior coming to bail him out hit him like a physical blow. His bank accounts were frozen. His job at the downtown financial firm was effectively over the second the fraud investigation launched. He had no house, no money, and no powerful friends left to hide behind. His brain, so accustomed to unearned privilege and patriarchal dominance, completely short-circuited. He could not accept that the woman he had spent years trying to diminish had just systematically dismantled his entire life in under an hour. He let out a primal, unhinged roar. It was not the sound of a calculated finance professional. It was the sound of a desperate, cornered animal. Marcus lunged forward, his expensive leather shoes tearing up the remaining grass as he charged directly at me. He raised his hands, his face contorted with pure, violently unchecked rage, fully intending to grab me by the shoulders and physically force me back into submission. He did not even make it 3 steps. The lead sheriff moved with a terrifying practiced speed. Before Marcus could even close the distance between us, the towering officer intercepted him, grabbing Marcus by the collar of his custom-tailored suit and violently spinning him around. The sheer force of the maneuver sent Marcus slamming face first into the hood of the nearest black corporate SUV. The heavy thud of his body hitting the metal echoed across the lawn. "Get your hands behind your back right now," the lead sheriff barked, driving his forearm into the center of Marcus' back to pin him down. Marcus thrashed wildly, screaming obscenities, and demanding that the officers let him go because he was a respected banking executive. His arrogant resistance only made the situation infinitely worse. 2 more deputies immediately rushed over, grabbing his flailing arms and forcefully wrenching them behind his back. The sharp, unmistakable metallic click of handcuffs snapping shut cut through his frantic shouting. "You are under arrest for making terroristic threats and resisting an officer." The lead sheriff stated, his voice devoid of any sympathy as he yanked Marcus upright. The pristine, expensive suit Marcus had spent hours picking out to impress the Boston investors was now smeared with dirt car grease and the undeniable reality of his own pathetic failure. Seeing her golden boy, forcefully restrained in handcuffs, absolutely shattered whatever fragile fake high society facade Vivian had left. The pearls, the silk scarf, the practiced aristocratic accent, all of it vanished instantly. She scrambled up from the mud, her designer dress completely ruined, and charged toward the police officers like a banshee. "Let my son go!" Vivian shrieked, batting frantically at the air before a deputy held up a firm hand to stop her advance. She whipped her head around to face me, her eyes practically bulging out of her skull with raw, unfiltered hatred. "You did this, you absolute demon. You orchestrated this entire circus just to destroy my family. You are a vile, vindictive monster. We gave you a respectable name, and this is how you repay us. You are ruining us." I did not flinch. I stood perfectly still, looking at the hysterical woman who had spent years making me feel like a temporary, unwanted guest in my own life. "I did not destroy your family." "Vivian," I said, my voice projecting clearly, so the remaining corporate security guards and legal counsel could witness her complete unraveling. Your son destroyed his own life the second he decided his fragile ego was more important than his marriage. He committed financial fraud. He conspired with a con artist. He tried to steal my property. I simply stepped out of the way and let gravity do the work. Vivian let out a breathless, devastated wail, clutching her chest, as if she were having a heart attack. No one rushed to her side. Chloe was too busy hyperventilating over Trent's frozen assets, and Marcus was actively being pushed toward the back of a marked police cruiser. I gave a slight calculated nod to Desmond. My lawyer did not miss a single beat. He stepped forward, his heavy leather briefcase in one hand and a thick, securely bound stack of legal documents in the other. He walked right up to Marcus, who was currently pinned against the side of the sheriff cruiser, sweating profusely and breathing heavily through his nose. Since your hands are currently tied up with the consequences of your own actions, I will make this delivery as efficient as possible, Desmond said, a dark, incredibly satisfying smirk playing on his lips. Desmond lifted the thick stack of papers and firmly tucked them right inside the breast pocket of Marcus' ruined suit jacket, patting it twice for good measure. You have been officially served, Desmond announced, his voice carrying the weight of absolute legal destruction. Those are your formal divorce papers. We are filing for an expedited dissolution of marriage based on irreconcilable differences and extreme financial misconduct. But that is not even the best part of the package, Marcus. We also included a formal civil lawsuit demanding immediate financial restitution. Marcus jerked his head up, his eyes darting frantically between Desmond and me. Restitution, he spat, spit flying from his lips. Restitution for what? I do not have a single dime of your money. I never touched your corporate accounts. You just proved that to the bank. I took a slow, deliberate step forward, closing the distance between us, until I was looking him directly in his panicked, bloodshot eyes. You really thought I would not notice $30,000 missing from my commercial supply credit line, Marcus, I asked, dropping my voice to a lethal whisper. You really thought you were a financial genius because you managed to siphon funds through a fake vendor invoice 3 months ago. The remaining color completely drained from his face. His mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. I knew about the theft the exact week you did it. I continued, mercilessly twisting the knife. You used my company money to secretly pay $30,000 of your mother's private debt, because you were terrified her financial problems would expose the image your family had been selling. You stole from the woman you called a working-class embarrassment just to keep that illusion alive. Vivian gasped loudly, taking a stumbling step backward. Her darkest, most humiliating secret was suddenly exposed right in front of the high-level corporate attorneys and security teams she was so desperate to impress. The woman who constantly bragged about her old money lineage was surviving entirely on stolen funds from a black woman from Decatur. You are going to pay back every single penny of that $30,000, Marcus, I said, stepping back and looking at the ruined man in handcuffs. Plus legal fees. Plus punitive damages. You wanted to play with my money so badly. Now you get to explain to a federal judge exactly why you committed credit fraud. Marcus sagged against the police cruiser, the fight completely draining out of his body. He had nothing left. No leverage, no money, no pride, and absolutely no way out. The sheriff placed a heavy hand on his shoulder, forcefully guiding him into the back of the squad car. The heavy door slammed shut, trapping him inside the cage. I turned away from the police cruiser and slowly walked over to where Vivian was standing. She was shaking violently, her ruined sun hat clutched tightly in her hands. She looked completely broken, entirely stripped of the arrogant, racist, and classist armor she had worn for years. She could not even bring herself to make eye contact with me. I reached out my hands, moving with calm, terrifying precision. I grabbed the lapels of her expensive, wrinkled linen dress. I gave the fabric a sharp, deliberate tug, adjusting her collar and smoothing out the wrinkles right over her collarbone. She held her breath, absolutely terrified of what I was going to do next. I leaned in close, my voice perfectly steady, carrying no anger, only absolute victorious finality. You told me earlier today that my presence was an embarrassment, I whispered, staring directly into her tear-filled eyes. You said this house needed to be cleared of my cheap working-class aesthetic so your high-class guests could feel comfortable. Well, you were absolutely right about one thing, Vivian. This house desperately needed to be cleaned. I let go of her collar and took a graceful step back, surveying the lawn where the rental furniture was being impounded. Her son was locked in a police car, and her son-in-law was facing federal prison. It is completely spotless now. I turned my back on Vivian and walked away, my crimson suit a stark contrast to the absolute devastation I left in my wake. The Horizon Hospitality security team was already moving on to the next phase of their property reclamation. They were not just removing the imported Italian furniture and the custom luxury cabanas. They were securing the perimeter, and that meant clearing out every single unauthorized vehicle parked on their newly acquired commercial real estate. A fleet of heavy-duty commercial tow trucks rumbled down the private driveway, their bright yellow lights flashing rhythmically against the dense Georgia heat. The loud mechanical grinding of winches and metal hooks filled the air. I walked toward my Porsche watching with profound satisfaction as the tow operators began hooking up the luxury SUVs belonging to Vivian and Chloe. "Wait, you cannot take my car!" Chloe shrieked, sprinting across the muddy lawn in her ruined designer heels. She waved her arms frantically at the tow truck driver. "My purse is in there. I have to drive my mother back to the city. You are stealing my property." The tow truck driver, a massive guy wearing a grease-stained work shirt, did not even blink. He continued operating the hydraulic lift, pulling Chloe's pristine white SUV onto the flatbed. "Ma'am, this vehicle is illegally parked on private corporate property," the driver stated loudly, completely unfazed by her hysterical demands. Horizon Hospitality ordered a total sweep. "You can pick your car up at the county impound lot tomorrow morning. There is a $500 release fee. Please step back before you get hurt." Vivian hobbled over her expensive linen dress stained with dirt and grass. She looked utterly deranged, her carefully cultivated image of old money. Atlanta society completely shredded into pieces. She tried to grab the door handle of her own luxury sedan, but a corporate security guard immediately stepped between her and the vehicle, holding up a firm hand. "You need to vacate the premises immediately. Ladies." The security guard ordered, his voice offering absolutely zero room for negotiation. "The county sheriffs have instructed us to clear this entire area. If you do not walk to the county road right now, you will be detained for trespassing alongside the other gentlemen." Vivian whipped her head around, looking toward the police cruisers. Marcus was already locked securely in the back of the first squad car, his face buried in his hands. Trent was currently being pressed against the hood of the second cruiser. The wealthy Boston investors had followed through on their threats with terrifying speed. They had shown the deputies the fraudulent wire transfers and the fake promotional brochures on their phones. That was more than enough probable cause for the sheriffs to detain Trent for grand larceny and wire fraud right on the spot. The arrogant white savior who thought he could use my land to scam his way to a fortune was now sobbing as the cold metal handcuffs clicked tightly around his wrists. I slid into the driver's seat of my Porsche and started the engine. The powerful roar of my car purred smoothly as I slowly navigated down the driveway, following the path the tow trucks had cleared. As I reached the end of the property line pulling out onto the dusty shoulder of the main county highway, I saw Vivian and Chloe standing by the side of the road. They were completely stranded. Their cars were gone. Their husbands were sitting in the back of police cruisers heading to the county jail. They were miles away from their comfortable buckhead bubbles covered in mud and baking in the oppressive afternoon sun. Chloe was frantically tapping her phone screen trying to hail a ride-share service, but we were too far out in the rural Lake District for a quick pickup. The surge pricing was likely astronomical, assuming a driver would even accept the ride. I rolled my tinted window down just a few inches as I idled past them. Vivian looked up, her tear-streaked face twisting with pure, unadulterated venom. She opened her mouth to hurl one last insult, one last desperate attempt to assert her imaginary dominance over the black woman she had constantly belittled. I did not give her the chance. I simply smiled, tapped the button to roll the window back up, and pressed my foot down on the accelerator. I drove away, leaving them choking on the dust of my tires. I did not look back in the rearview mirror. I had permanently excised the cancer from my life, and I was stepping into a future they could not even begin to comprehend. 6 months later, the air in my new downtown Atlanta penthouse was cool, crisp, and smelled of expensive vanilla candles and absolute freedom. I stood by the floor-to-ceiling glass windows, looking out over the glittering city skyline as the sunset painted the clouds in vibrant shades of gold and violet. I held a crystal glass of my favorite Napa Valley Cabernet, taking a slow, deeply satisfying sip. The view from the top was breathtaking, especially when you built the tower yourself. The fallout from that day at Lake Lanier was brutal, without me adding a single extra move. Marcus faced years in prison over the banking and financial fraud tied to his own conduct. Exactly the kind of future he once insisted could never touch a man with his title. The divorce moved forward with his finances already under investigation, and my civil claim demanded restitution for the $30,000 he had secretly taken from my commercial credit line to cover his mother's debts. The banking career he used as a weapon against me collapsed with the investigation. The man who tried to freeze my money had finally learned what it felt like to have every financial decision examined under a microscope. Trent's collapse came from the people he had tried to impress. The Boston investors demanded their money back, pursued the class action they had threatened on the lawn, and refused to let him hide behind Marcus or Chloe. With his accounts frozen, his reputation destroyed, and creditors closing in from every direction, Trent disappeared from the circles where he once strutted like a king. He eventually fled under the weight of the debt and legal pressure he had created for himself. Chloe discovered that status was useless once the money supporting it vanished. The imported furniture, the designer clothes, the private retreat fantasy, and the borrowed prestige all disappeared with Trent's accounts and the investors' lawsuits. She could no longer call me begging to rescue the life she had helped build on my property. The woman who mocked my Decatur roots was left standing beside Vivian with no lake house, no powerful weekend, and no illusion that their family still controlled my future. What remained was the public humiliation of knowing every guest had watched the entire performance collapse in real time, and that I had not needed to destroy her personally to make it happen. Vivian's collapse was quieter, but just as complete. The woman who spent years presenting herself as Atlanta old money had been exposed in front of the exact wealthy guests she valued more than basic decency. After the Lake Lanier disaster, invitations, stopped calls went unanswered, and the people she had tried so desperately to impress wanted nothing to do with the family scandal. Without my money quietly supporting Marcus, and without Trent's fake prestige to hide behind, the image she had built could no longer sustain itself. She was left with the truth she had refused to see: the working-class daughter-in-law she treated like an embarrassment had been the strongest financial foundation anywhere near that family. I turned away from the window and walked toward the marble kitchen island, where my laptop displayed the latest Onyx Properties reports. The $5.2 million sale had not created my company. I had built Onyx long before Marcus understood what I owned. But the transaction gave me room to expand on my own terms with every new project held, where no insecure husband could use it as a prop for his ego. I bought the penthouse because I wanted it, not because I needed anyone to recognize the address. For the first time in years, every contract, every key, and every decision in my life belonged entirely to me. I was no longer just the hardworking girl from Decatur. I was no longer the disrespected daughter-in-law, shrinking in the background of a toxic family dinner. I was an empire. I was a force of nature who moved markets and commanded respect the second I walked into a boardroom. I took another sip of my wine, savoring the rich, complex flavor. I looked directly at my reflection in the dark glass of the penthouse window. My natural hair was beautifully styled, my posture was flawless, and my spirit was completely unbroken. When someone tries to take the key to your house, do not stand outside the door crying and begging them to let you back in. Do not shrink yourself to fit into a space they decided you do not belong in. Change the locks, sell the entire building, and let them lock themselves inside the very trap they created. The sweetest revenge in this world is not anger. It is not screaming matches or dramatic confrontations. The absolute sweetest revenge is a $5 million cash contract effective immediately. It is building a life so massive, so incredibly successful, that the people who tried to destroy you have to watch you win from the absolute bottom of the barrel.